LoveLore Library. Chapter 500. Hui Mo looked at her speechlessly and decisively turned his eyes to the sky. Xiao Zhangping, why don't you look at me? Are you secretly laughing at me in your heart? Do you think that I, a princess, live such a ridiculous life? Am I right? Hui Mo, Xiao Zhangping, you dare to not speak. That means you admit it. I thought you were the only good person among these people, but I didn't expect that you also think of me like this. You are going to piss me off. Hui Mo smiled bitterly and said, I don't speak because I think Princess's question is very ridiculous. In my heart, although Princess is sometimes reckless and sometimes can't control her temper, but in fact, you are a very kind and lovely person. How can you be related to the word ridiculous? The first half of his words almost made Xiao Zhangping angry, but the second half of his words magically smoothed her hair. She wiped her tears and said, Is what you said true? You are not coaxing me. Of course not. Hui Mo sat down on the stone bench next to her. Everyone in the imperial city wears a mask. They smile in front of people and stab people in the back. Only you live a real life. If you want to cry, you laugh. If you want to lose your temper, you lose your temper. Hey, I haven't finished yet. Your Highness, please don't do it. I want to say that the princess is the purest woman I have ever met, and also the one who makes my heart ache the most. Even if you really made some mistakes this time, you also have your own little selfishness. But Princess Heartwarming begged you in front of her, so you can't refuse. Moreover, after that, you tried your best to make up for it. As for my Shitzi, you love him openly. You tried hard and didn't regret it. Instead, you are brave and admirable. Therefore, I feel that your Highness is really very cute. Is he really cute? But why doesn't he have me in his heart? Even if I don't care about my reputation, he still can't like me. And he's so polite to me now, as if I'm a stranger. Although he doesn't say it out loud, I'm sure he hasn't forgiven me in his heart. I'm sure he still hates me for hiding Ning Shu and causing her to become like this. The more Xiao Zhangping spoke, the sadder he felt. He cried until he was out of breath. There are also others who are avoiding me like the plague. They don't even want to talk to me. They must be holding a grudge against me. Princess. Hui Mo couldn't help but comfort her back. Xiao Zhang couldn't help but choke with sobs, feeling wronged. Do you know? This time, I snuck out behind Imperial Father's back. When I go back, I will definitely be severely punished. Actually, I don't like the dark nights, especially when it's raining. Every time it's raining, I will hide in my bedroom alone and not go anywhere. Because my mother died in such a rainy night, I rushed out barefoot and knocked on the door of the Imperial Hospital. When I came back, her body was stiff. But I still couldn't help but rush over when I heard the news that you were chasing her all the way to the west. Also, I used to hate riding the most. Because I was kicked by fourth brother's horse when I was a child, so I never rode a horse again. But I knew that the carriage was small and couldn't hold so many people. In order to make room for Ning Shu, I took the initiative to get off the carriage and ride the horse. Although I, Xiao Zhangping, am not favored by Imperial Father, I am still a princess. I have never served anyone since I was a child. But in order to make up for the guilt in my heart, I took the initiative to wipe Ning Shu's body, change the medicine, and help her bathe and change clothes. I was splashed with water by her. I really know that I was wrong and tried to make up for it. Why can't they forgive me? Hui Mo looked at her deeply. Princess, no matter whether others can understand you or not, I have never hated you. When I found out that it was you who did it, I was indeed disappointed. However, when you chased after me on that rainy night in the carriage, I knew that I had not misjudged you. You will always be the sincere and kind little princess in my heart who clearly distinguishes between love and hate. Reflected in his eyes, Xiao Zhangping was lost for a moment. Really? Hui Mo didn't even think about it. Of course it's true. I swear on my most cherished treasure. If I lie, I will destroy it and I will die. Seeing his sincere expression and his pair of brown transparent eyes, Xiao Zhangping's heart unconsciously skipped a beat. Even her tears unconsciously stopped. But when she saw that he took out the set of knife that he loved as much as his life, she jumped up. Don't point such a terrible thing at me. Scram. Ah. Princess. Hui Mo wanted to chase after her, but he was kicked to the side. He silently looked at his treasure. It seemed that he had messed up something. Sob, sob, sob. Chapter 501. Ning Shu's hands tightly gripped the corner of Xiao Qing's clothes, hiding behind him as they slowly walked through the market. Every time a person approached, she would hide behind Xiao Qing in fright, burying her face into his back, like a rabbit whose tail had been cut off. From then on, she was allergic to all humans with one head and two legs. Xiao Qing firmly held her hand, not moving an inch away, giving her a sense of security. In that torrential rain that seemed to never stop, that person used a single night to completely destroy Ning Shu's faith in people. It was too much for her to accept again in one night. Now, it was already not easy for her to not scream and hurt herself. Everything else had to be done step by step. When a child holding a candy painting and jumping around accidentally bumped into Ning Shu, she hit again, her body trembling uncontrollably. She grabbed Xiao Qing's clothes, as if she was using her whole body to resist, expressing that she wanted to go back, that she wanted to escape. Xiao Qing stopped and gently pulled her in front of him. He said, "Xiao Shu, don't be afraid. They won't hurt you. Have you forgotten what I said to you? As long as I'm here, no one can touch a single finger of yours. Do you see that? The third shop on the left seems to be selling freshly made honey fruits. Everyone who has bought them is praising them. I can't see with my eyes. Can you help me take a look and see if those fruits are exquisitely made and if they taste sweet? Is that okay?" Ning Shu lowered her head, her heart incomparably tangled. After hesitating for a long time, she finally couldn't bear to disappoint him. The person in front of her treated her so well, how could she disappoint him? Moreover, he said that he would accompany her, always accompany her. In front of her, he said, "Come, hold my hand, let's walk over together." Ning Shu looked at the hand in front of her and finally gathered all the courage in her body to nod, completely placing her hand in his palm. The fruit stall was only 20 steps away from them. Ning Shu trembled with fear with every step, as if she was facing an abyss. When she finally finished the 20 steps, the last customer in front of the stall took the fruit and left. Xiao Qing listened and said, "There's no one else, let's go." Ning Shu still resisted, there's still, boss. Xiao Qing was very patient, chuckling, "Boss doesn't eat people, he only sells sweet fruits. Can you help me count how many different types there are?" Ning Shu's attention was somewhat diverted. She stood on her tiptoes and counted the fruits one by one. Every time she counted one, her craving increased a little. Because those fruits were indeed too well made. Each one was made into exquisite shapes, some were like different colored flowers, some were like colorful fruits. Even the colors were imitated accordingly, bright and attractive. The most wonderful thing was the row of rabbits, goldfish, and pig-shaped fruits beside the boss's hand. They were so lively and charmingly naive. One look and one could not help but smile. Ning Shu couldn't help but be entranced, she didn't even notice when the boss came closer. Until the boss happily said, "Miss, which kind do you want to try? You can choose." She was startled and immediately shrank back. The boss was still enthusiastically introducing, "My fruits are all fresh out of the steamer early in the morning, the fillings are all fresh flowers and fruits, each flavor is different. The summer air is stuffy, this old man specially put refreshing mint leaves inside, I guarantee that it won't be greasy at all, after eating it, you still want to eat it. Miss, you can choose whatever kind of fruit you like, if it's not delicious, it's free." She was still frightened, but the boss's appearance was very kind, and the pig-like fruit in his hand was very tempting. Finally, the desire for good food gradually overcame her fear. Little by little, she reached out her hand and gently pointed at the pig-like fruit. The boss neatly wrapped the pig-like fruit in a lotus leaf and handed it over. She hesitantly took it to her lips. Just as she took a bite, her eyes lit up, and she put the fruit to Xiahou Qing's lips. "Delicious." Xiahou Qing took a bite along the place where she had just bitten, lightly licked his lips, and smiled after the aftertaste. It's really delicious." Ning Shu's eyes curved, and her smile was as sweet as the fruit. Her first try didn't hurt her, so she slowly let her guard down. She immediately turned back to choose a lot of other flavors, this, that, and that. Okay. Then Xiahou Qing used similar methods to let her adapt and relax again and again. Although she still didn't dare to take the initiative to get close to people, she gradually didn't feel so repulsed. After playing the role of the old man of the fruit stall, Tianwen immediately turned into the sugar painting stall owner. He took off his fake beard, sweating profusely from the heat, and complained dizzily, "Oh, hey, King Zhou of Shang teased the feudal lords for Bo Bao Si's sake. I know what's going on now, it's too tiring, when will this end?" Beside him, Jiu Si, who was playing the trick stall owner, said lightly, "That's King Yu of Zhou, idiot." Chapter 502. In this market, half of the people were guards of the Nanping mansion. They accompanied Ning Shu for 3 days in a row. Ning Shu hid behind Xiahou Qing and could walk side by side with him. Occasionally, when she saw something interesting, she would take the initiative to take a look. However, she still held his hand, as if that hand was the source of all her courage. With him, she would not be afraid of the world. On the 4th day, the originally quiet town suddenly seemed to come alive. The streets were crowded with people. It seemed that everyone in the town had come out. It seemed that today's play could not go on, and there was no need to continue. This town is not big and there are not many people. Why is the street so lively today? But what festival is it? That's not right. The Dragon Boat Festival has passed, and the Qixi Festival has not arrived yet. Now it's June, the busy time for farmers. They shouldn't be so idle. Shi Yan took off his fake beard and asked a person, "Sir, are you holding a celebration today?" The old man's ears were sharp and his eyes were sharp. He had already heard that a group of nobles had come to the town a few days ago. Seeing the young man's appearance, he could guess who it was. Therefore, he said, "Noble sir, you may not know, but today is our Baijia town's unique festival, called the Mysterious Maiden Festival. For the people of our Baijia town, this is a festival more important than the New Year. How can it not be lively? What's the origin of this mystery fairy festival?" The old man said, "Honorable guest, please look over there. That mountain is called the Mystery Fairy Peak. Since the day our Baijia town was recorded, this mountain has been there. It has protected the peace of our Baijia town for generations. Legend has it that it is the incarnation of the mystery fairy of the 9th heaven. She was wronged and punished to the human world, and turned into a mountain. Because of the kindness of a god, she will spontaneously protect the people here every day when she wakes up. But every day after she falls asleep, the strong resentment caused by the injustice rages and condenses together, erupting at a fixed time every year. Therefore, every year on this day, the people here, regardless of whether they are men or women, old or young, have to stop their work and gather together to hold a festival. They sincerely kowtow to the mystery fairy and offer sacrifices to dispel the terrible resentment, praying for the fairy's protection. No one dares to be negligent. Otherwise, they will suffer the wrath of goddess Xian Nyu. So miraculous. What will happen to those who don't participate? Will they suddenly contract a chronic disease, or will their family's wealth be ruined? The old man glanced at him and said, "You don't believe me, do you? In the past, many people who passed by our town didn't believe me and were punished in the end. Take last year as an example. Those 3 fur merchants passed by our town for a temporary rest. We kindly persuaded them to come out and pay their respects together, but they became suspicious instead. Thus, the first one was strolling on the mountain when he suddenly saw the shadow of a woman in red floating past. He turned around and accidentally stepped on a stone, slipped, and rolled down the mountain to his death. His brain juice was even smashed out. The second person seemed to be waiting for someone on the Jade Belt Bridge. After waiting for a long time, he was annoyed and wanted to walk by the river. Suddenly, a hand reached out from the water and dragged him into the river to drown him. The corpse was fished out, and there were 5 deep scratches on its feet. The third one was even more terrifying. He was sleeping soundly in an inn when a fire suddenly broke out in the middle of the day and burned him to death. In the sky full of fire, many people saw a red shadow floating around and could faintly hear the laughter in their ears. That scene was so terrible. So, distinguished guests, don't blame me for not reminding you. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Otherwise, there won't be anyone to collect your corpse. The story gave Shi Yan goosebumps in the summer. He cupped his hands to express his gratitude and hurried back to his young master to repeat this strange story. Young master, although Confucius doesn't talk about strange things, it's better to believe in some things than not. Anyway, let's just go with the crowd and pay our respects. Shall we go? Chapter 503. After listening to Shi Yan's mysterious explanation, Xiahou Qing gently twisted the finger bone in his hand a few times and smiled lightly. He put the finger bone into his sleeve pocket and reached out to take a few slender bamboo leaves from Josie. His slender fingers nimbly folded and flipped them. Soon, a nimble bamboo grasshopper appeared in his palm. This was the little toy that Ning Shu loved the most at the market yesterday. After returning to the inn, she played with it for a long time. It didn't even stick to him as much until the little grasshopper fell apart. Ning Shu was very disappointed until Xiahou Qing softly coaxed her that he would buy an identical grasshopper for her tomorrow. After he finished making the grasshopper, he continued to make the next bamboo rooster. He said, according to the old man, since everyone went to participate in the ceremony and only 3 people didn't go, how did they know that the first person saw a red shadow and wasn't attacked by the beasts in the mountain? The second person was dragged into the water by the water ghost on the bridge and didn't accidentally fall into the river and get entangled by the lush water plants and drown. The third person was burned to death in his sleep and wasn't locked in the inn and murdered. Shi Yan was slightly stunned. Does Shitzi mean that there is a problem? Xiahou Qing's tone was indifferent. There is this possibility, but it can't be ruled out that it is indeed a subtle coincidence. A person's imagination was limitless, especially when it came to matters related to their beliefs. They would subtly fabricate countless mysterious details, thus creating an unfathomable atmosphere and adding even more mysterious colors, causing people to fear, revere, and worship them. No matter which possibility it is, this Xian Nu Peak is indeed a little interesting. Xiao Shu. He waved his hand and called Ning Shu, who was catching butterflies in the hydrangeas, over. He reached out his hand. Ning Shu saw the little toy in his palm and her eyes immediately lit up. She ran over and held his hand. She tiptoed and planted a kiss on Xiahou Qing's lips. Ever since she had kissed his scar that day, she had never gotten tired of this little action. Especially after she had suddenly attacked him, his handsome and otherworldly face had suddenly returned to the mortal world, and the tips of his ears had quietly been dyed with a touch of red, just like now. On the side, Shi Yan and the others immediately coughed and looked up at the sky as if to say, "You continue, you continue. We were blind just now and didn't see anything." Xiahou Qing completely ignored their teasing. He knocked her head in exasperation and enjoyment and said, "Little Shu, do you want to go out and play? There is no market today, but there is a special ceremony. Everyone in the town will participate. So it will be very lively and there will be many things that you have never seen before. But there will also be a lot of people. But Xiao Shu, remember that I will always be by your side and will never let anyone hurt you. Xiao Shu, you decide whether you want to go or not." Ning Shu was tangled and bit her lips. Her eyebrows were full of struggle. Over the past few days, she had been slowly led out by Xiahou Qing. She had seen many strangers. These people were either warm and courteous to her or indifferently brushed past her. In short, no one showed any hostility to her, nor did they harm her in the slightest. But the fear of the unknown was too deep in her bones on that rainy night. How could it be erased in a day and night? She struggled for a long time and still wanted to shake her head. Then she felt him silently reach over and hold her hand. Yes, she was still very afraid, very afraid. But she had this person. This person's name was Xiahou Qing. She did not have many memories of him in her mind, but she was very certain that this person would always be in front of her to protect her. So she took a deep breath and restrained the trembling of her body. Then she forcefully nodded her head. "I want to go, I want to go." Xiahou Qing's heart trembled. He could not help but impulsively embrace the girl in front of him. His eyes were slightly wet. "My Xiao Shu is so good. You are the best woman in the world." Chapter 504. Ning Shu lowered her head and rubbed against his chest. She didn't know how to express it. She just did it instinctively. Although he didn't force her, she clearly felt what he wanted. He wanted her to get rid of the nightmare of that rainy night. He wanted her to stop locking herself in a small cage and not dare to face anyone. He wanted her to be brave, he wanted her to be strong, he wanted her to accept the world again. She felt it, so no matter what he wanted her to do, she would try her best. Even if she was afraid, even if she hesitated, as long as it made him happy. The world didn't matter to her at all. Only he mattered. The group of people got ready and followed the crowd to the Xian Nyu peak. It had to be said that the people of Baijia town were devout to the gods they believed in. Along the way, even a 4 or 5-year-old child held a lotus lantern in his hand and carefully followed the adults to the Xian Nyu temple, preparing to present it to the Xian Nyu empress later. Ning Shu looked at it curiously, so Xiahou Qing waved his hand and ordered Jussi to buy one for each person. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. With this lotus lantern, Ning Shu's attention was diverted by more than half. Even the tension of being surrounded by the crowd was reduced a lot. Holding the small lotus lantern with both hands, her snow-white face was illuminated by the bright sun above her head. Many men couldn't help but look at her when they passed by. Xiahou Qing frowned and ordered Hui Mo to present the veil hat and personally cover her. With her vision blocked, Ning Shu felt a little uncomfortable and said, "It's uncomfortable. Take it off." Xiahou Qing rarely said domineeringly, "Good girl, you must wear it well." She raised her head in confusion and looked around through the gauze curtain. She saw that many women around deliberately slowed down their pace and looked shyly and timidly at Xiaoqing. Suddenly, she understood. She put the lotus lantern in Xiaoqing's hand, turned around and asked Hui Mo for a veil hat. She stood on tiptoe and tried to put it on Xiaoqing's head. You too, wear it well. Don't let others see. Xiaoqing chuckled and bent down cooperatively. Okay, whatever Xiao Shu says, I'll listen to you. Xiao Zhangping was disgusted when he saw the two of them eating vinegar from each other. He rolled his eyes and sped up his pace angrily. Shi Yan kicked him lightly, and Huema hurriedly chased after her. Princess, princess, I specially chose this lotus lantern. It looks better than the one in your hand. Why don't we exchange it? What kind of look is that? The indigo lamp in my hand is clearly more solemn and dignified, more suitable for worshipping. Your color isn't bright, your elements aren't plain, you're half-baked, so ugly. Ah, so it's like that. Since your highness doesn't like it, I'll take it further away. Come back. Who told you to take it? Give it to me. Although this princess doesn't like it, this princess will reluctantly accept your kind intentions. Remember, I'm only doing this because I pity you. You're not allowed to think too much, understand? Understood, understood, understood. Hee hee hee. What do you mean by hee hee? I said, I'm only doing this because I'm reluctant. No, it's not because of you. I really understand, hee 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 hee. The group of people talked and laughed. Only Zigui, who was at the back, silently looked at the lotus lantern in her hand without saying a word. Since the rainy night that destroyed countless people, she forever lost the ability to speak. She could only silently look at all the excitement around her. It seemed that other than the last thought of protecting her miss, she had already left the world of mortals. Shi Yan casually ran back from the front, holding a water bag in his hand. It's such a hot day, drink some water. Before Mr. Duan left, I specially asked him to make me a cold drink to relieve the heat. Come and drink some. How are you? Are you tired? If you can't walk, don't be embarrassed. Come and find me immediately. I'll carry you. Zigui raised her head and looked at him repulsively. There seemed to be thousands of words in her eyes, expressing, go away, I don't need you to pity me. Shi Yan's enthusiasm was wasted, and he sighed. How many times have I said, I'm not pitying you? You're so fierce. Even if you can't speak, your eyes can kill me. Why should I pity you? So the one who should be pitiful is not you, but me. In this life, I was extremely afraid of women and swore to never get married. But the heavens wanted to torment me and let me meet you. The first time I saw you, I knew I was done for. Every night, when I closed my eyes, I was dreaming of marrying a tigress like you as my wife. I was so anxious that I got angry. But you just don't like me. Even now, you still don't like me. Tell me, am I not the most pitiful one? Zigui's eyelashes trembled. She turned her face and coldly ignored him. Shi Yan was not discouraged. He continued to shamelessly say, I know you've been brooding about your tongue these days. You feel that you're half useless. But what's wrong with that? I said that I'm a talkative person. In the future, I'll be your mouth. If you don't agree, you have to say it quickly. If you don't say it, I'll take it that you agree. Hey, don't hit me. You're still that tigress from before, so fierce. I'm telling you, it's useless even if you hit me. My biggest advantage is that I'm thick-skinned. Whether you accept it or not, there's no discussion. It's settled. Ha 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 ha. Zigui's delicate face was stunned for a moment as she looked at the laughing and escaping figure that was as bright as the sun. Her eyes became wet, causing the figure to become dazed, but it was even more dazzling. It was deeply, deeply imprinted into her heart. She turned her head and quickly blinked away the wetness in her eyes. Her face bloomed with the first expression of a living person in these days. She chuckled. She pulled out the soft whip from her waist and chased after Shi Yan fiercely. She whipped him fiercely. Chapter 505. After walking for about an hour, Xiahou Qing and his companions mixed in the crowd and gathered in front of the Xian Nyu temple at the foot of the mountain. There was a clear pool of water in the temple, which had a radius of 100 steps. In the clear pool, there was a 3-foot stone statue of Xian Nyu. The stone statue's face was beautiful and gentle, merciful and compassionate. People could not help but submit to it at first sight. There were tens of thousands of believers in the temple, and the crowd was so packed that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The one who presided over the ceremony was a respectable elder, who was also the mayor of the town. He wore a red mask with fangs and stood in front of the altar. The bell in his hand rang, and he jumped in front of the statue of Xian Nyu while murmuring something. The believers knelt down and held the lanterns above their heads. They looked at the old man who was performing the ceremony on the altar with fanatical eyes. When the old man finished performing the ceremony, he closed his eyes and waved his hand. The people stood up and rushed to put the lanterns in their hands into the clear pool. Then, they each raised a small knife and scissors and slashed their arms heavily, forcing the surging hot blood from their wounds into the blue waves. In the blink of an eye, the clear pool water was dyed bright red, and even the merciful goddess statue in the middle of the pool seemed to be tainted with a trace of evil. Hui Mo and the others, who originally wanted to join in the fun, were shocked. Only now did they realize that their real sacrifice was not the colorful lanterns, but their own blood. According to what he heard, Xiahou Qing immediately covered Ning Shu's eyes. He was afraid that the incredible bloody scene in front of her would stimulate her again. Hui Mo had goosebumps all over his body. Oh my God, are the people here sick? It's the first time I've seen such a way to worship the gods. Those people's faces are pale with blood, but they are still squeezing their blood vessels. They are sick. Your Highness, let's not watch this show. Let's hurry down the mountain. I have a bad premonition that the people here are panicking. The scene in front of him could no longer be described as pious. These people were not afraid of death or pain. It was as if they did not care about the lives of their gods. It was as if they had lost their minds. Not only that, some parents didn't care about their children's cries and struggles. They forcefully cut their children's arms and injected the fresh and fragile life force into the pool to express their most sincere worship to goddess Xian Nyu. Seeing this scene, Hui Mo immediately stopped in his tracks. Everyone present, including Jiu Si, also lost their usual calmness and was burning with anger. Shi Yan immediately cursed, "My God, what are they doing? That was their child. Fuck. You're sick, sick, sick." Hui Mo was shocked. He remembered that 10 years ago, his parents had cut off their own flesh for him to eat. However, these people in front of him were so cold-blooded and heartless. They didn't even care about the life of their own child. The corners of his eyes turned red as he clenched his fists and rushed forward. Jiu Si immediately stopped him. There are nearly 1,000 of them gathered here. The disparity between the enemy and us is too great. If we rush in rashly, we may be controlled by them. Moreover, they won't be able to appreciate our good intentions. For the first time, Hui Mo showed such an irritable look. Then are we just going to watch those innocent children suffer from these twisted torments? Even if they are lucky enough to survive, they will be confused by the same ideas in the future and become another wave of the same lunatics. Will they continue to harm their next generation? No, even if they gang up to kill me, I will stop them. Chapter 506. Just as Hui Mo was about to rush over to stop these crazy believers, the other side took the initiative. The mayor suddenly opened his eyes and said to them in a solemn voice, "Foreigners, why don't you kneel?" In an instant, hundreds and thousands of pairs of eyes gathered on them. Every pair of eyes was eerie, as if they were paper dolls for the dead. Ha! Shi Yan laughed. He carried his precious quiver on his back and crossed his arms in front of his chest. He said carelessly, "My master has a noble status. He has always knelt before the heavens and the earth. If you want my master to kneel, I'm afraid your gods can't afford it." Some fanatics in the crowd immediately roared, "How dare you blaspheme our gods? How dare you? They are foreigners again. As long as they come, our town's ceremony will be ruined. Tie them up. Tie them up. Tie them up." The mayor spread his arms and temporarily suppressed the anger of the people. He said, "Since you have come to our Baijia town, you should abide by our rules. Otherwise, don't blame us for being rude. We will tie you up and send you to the goddess to atone for your sins. If you are injured, disabled, or dead, don't blame us." As the princess of Great Yu, she had never been threatened so shamelessly. Xiao Zhangping raised her eyebrows and said, "You are so arrogant. Do you know who I am?" "I am..." Hui Mo was worried that her identity would be exposed, so he pulled her behind him and said with a smile, "This land belongs to the king. Listening to your tone, why do I feel that you don't care about the law at all? It's like you recognize the statue as the king. It's really fresh. If you want to catch us, come and try. Let's see if I am afraid of you," Jussi ordered. Everyone lined up to protect Xiahou Qing and the others behind them. The townspeople stood aside spontaneously. Seeing that a dispute was inevitable, suddenly the crowd burst out, "Oh my God, it's bleeding again. It's over, people are going to die again." Everyone looked at the statue of the goddess in the middle of the pool. They saw that in the eyes of the goddess who bemoaned the state of the universe and pitied the fate of mankind, 2 lines of blood flowed out without warning in broad daylight. The divinity of the statue was completely wiped out and turned into evil. Seeing such a suspenseful scene, Hui Mo and the others couldn't help but feel surprised. Even Ning Shu, whose eyes were covered by Xiahou Qing, curiously opened Xiahou Qing's hand and looked at the strange statue without blinking. The citizens who were filled with righteous indignation all knelt down in fear. Even the mayor stopped the ceremony, took off his mask, and worriedly said to the citizens, "Everyone, let's go down the mountain and look around to see if anything happened." The people looked pale. They had no time to care about the wounds on their arms. They lowered their heads and sighed. Following the mayor's orders, they led their families to search along the path down the mountain. This group of strange people dispersed, and no one paid them any attention. Shi Yan clicked his tongue and said, "What should we do?" Jussi said, "Wait. There must be some kind of secret in this town. According to their words just now, this is not the first time such a thing has happened. We are foreigners. No matter what we do, it will be interpreted as an ulterior motive. It's better to wait here and see what happens." On the other side, Zigui looked worriedly at Ning Shu, afraid that what she had just seen would awaken bad memories. However, he saw her tilt her head, her clear eyes locked onto the statue. She did not move at all. She gently tugged at Xiahou Qing's sleeve and whispered, "Eyes, I want to see." Xiahou Qing understood. She wanted to get closer to the statue to find the secret of the 2 lines of blood tears. However, he whispered, "Aren't you afraid?" Ning Shu's thick black eyelashes fluttered a few times. However, the curiosity buried deep in her heart uncontrollably emerged. It gradually took the upper hand and suppressed the fear. She had a feeling that she should do this to solve some mysteries, to unveil some fog with her own hands, to make the unclear things clear, and to show the true colors of everything in the world. It seemed that this was the meaning of her existence. So she said, "I'm a little afraid, but I want to see." Chapter 507. Xiaoqing smiled and said, "My little Shu is really the bravest. Okay, I'll carry you up." She was his eyes, and he was her wings. Xiaoqing wrapped an arm around her waist, and with the tip of his foot on the ground, he carried her and spun up, landing lightly on the large hand that the deity statue had extended. Xiaoqing said in a deep voice, "Little Shu, do you see anything wrong?" Ning Shu touched the bleeding eyes of the statue with her fingers and sniffed it. She frowned and said, "It smells fishy." The townspeople went to search together, but before Ning Shu could figure out where the unusual smell of blood came from, someone at the foot of the mountain let out a shrill scream and quickly shouted, "Ah, husband! How can you leave us like this? How can we live like this? Come and see. People are dead. People are dead. 3 more. Oh my God. Her Majesty Xian Nyu is angry. Our Baijia town is finished." Hearing the noise, Xiaoqing listened carefully. He landed on the ground with Ning Shu in his arms and immediately rushed over. Jiu Si and others did not hesitate to follow. When she saw the 3 corpses surrounded by the crowd, Xiao Zhangping's face turned pale. She turned around and vomited. Hui Mo hurriedly patted her back. Xiao Zhangping was trembling all over. She said in horror, "What are those things? Are they really human?" It was not her fault that she was so delicate. The 3 corpses had died so miserably that none of them had a whole body. The first one seemed to have been bitten by a ferocious beast. Half of the flesh on his body was gone, leaving only a skeleton with shreds of flesh hanging from it. The second one had just been fished out of the water. His skin was blue and his eyeballs were bulging out. His neck and legs were full of handprints, as if he had been dragged into the water and drowned by a ghost. The third one was even worse. His limbs had all been chopped off, and he was covered in blood. He looked like a human swine, and his entire body was emitting a nauseating stench. His mouth had been sewn up with needles, and there were bloody holes one after another. Some brave townspeople approached and pried open his mouth, only to find that it was filled with night incense. In the blink of an eye, he turned around and vomited again. Before the relatives of the corpses could even get close, they had already fainted from crying. Even Jiu Si, who had always been calm, was somewhat pale. He was forcefully holding back his vomit. Shi Yan and the others had long vomited. Even Hui Mo, who was used to big scenes, couldn't stand it anymore. He held his breath and said, "Oh my God. Why did she use such a humiliating method to kill people? This goddess Xian Nyu is too much of a character." Only the 2 of them were as calm as ever. One of them was Xiaoqing. He had already lost his sight and smell, so he was naturally unaffected. The second was Ning Shu. She had thought that she would be afraid and bring up bad memories, but she did not expect to see this scene without a trace of fear. Instead, she was like a fish in water, curiously approaching and looking around, as if it was her instinct. Zigui hurriedly took out a handkerchief and handed it over, so that his young miss would not be offended by those filthy things. After the townspeople vomited all the things in their stomachs, they finally felt uneasy and were filled with righteous indignation. Mysterious Fairy used to only harm foreigners when she was angry. But now she has extended her hand to the townspeople of Baijia town, which means that Mysterious Fairy's resentment can no longer be suppressed. What should we do? Should we run away? We have lived here for generations. Our clan's land is all here. Where can we run to? Moreover, Mysterious Fairy is so powerful. As long as she wants to kill people, even if we run to the ends of the earth, it will be useless. Have you forgotten Bai Lao San and his family? Then are we going to wait for death here? I haven't lived long enough. I don't want to die. It must be that these foreigners were disrespectful to Mysterious Fairy, so Mysterious Fairy's resentment was completely aroused and she sent down the divine punishment. As long as we catch them and take them to Mysterious Fairy as a blood sacrifice, her anger will definitely be extinguished. Catch them, catch them. Chapter 508. The angry crowd shouted uncontrollably with desperation. The scene was out of control again. Jiu Si and the others stood in formation. Looking at these fools who had lost their minds, Shi Yan couldn't help but complain, are their brains eaten by dogs? How can they believe in divine punishment? If we really have such great power, we should make a vow to that damn Miss Xian and curse them all to death. Jiu Si said, don't talk too fast. A group of crazy people can't be judged by common sense. Although they are a group of country boors, 2 fists can't fight against 4 hands. They outnumber us by more than 10 times. Let's find a way to deal with them. Hui Mo took out a bottle of medicine from his waist and said, don't be afraid. I'm here. If they don't know what's good for them, then don't blame me for being rude. This bottle of dark sky and dark earth has been made by myself. I haven't tried it yet. As long as they inhale a little bit, I guarantee that even a fierce tiger will soften into a dead cat. Just when the 2 sides were confronting each other and their eyes were red with anger, a quiet and weak voice in the corner suddenly said, it's not divine punishment. It's murder. It was Ning Shu, who had been squatting beside the body and poking it with her finger. Who is talking nonsense? The dead man died so miserably. If it's not divine punishment, what is it? It was another prestigious elder in Baijia town who spoke. As we all know, the only mountain around Baijia town is Miss Xian. Miss Xian is there, and there are no fierce beasts on the mountain. How could this lame Lao Ba be bitten like this? As for this Lai Tu Si, although his brain is not very bright, who doesn't know that he is the best swimmer in our Bai family town? Even if there is someone who would fall into the water and drown to death, it would definitely not be him. Moreover, the handprints on his body are so thin that they only have 4 fingers. How can he be alive? The last one was the butcher from the pork shop. He was fat and strong, and when he stood up, he was as tall as a small mountain. The butcher's knife on his waist never left his hand, and he wasn't even afraid of bandits. Other than the gods, who could harm him? How old are you, little girl? How dare you talk nonsense here? Facing so many questioning eyes, Ning Shu was a little scared. They are already dead. They were just, silly girl, you can't even speak properly. Scram to the side. You're just looking for an excuse to save your lives. No way. Just as a ruffian was about to make a scene, a golden bead suddenly flew through the air and hit his face. Before he could get angry, a pure gold token was hung in front of him and everyone else, which quickly caused a commotion. Lord Nanping's mansion. It's that Lord Nanping's mansion. Then could he be the legendary crown prince of Nanping, Xiahou Qing? We've actually offended such a character. Will our entire family be executed? Hurry up and get out of the way. There might be people in the world who did not know the emperor's name, but there was no one who did not know who Xiahou Qing was. It was not only because of his short but dazzling experience in the past 21 years, nor was it because of his peerless talent and appearance, nor was it because of the enormous Nanping mansion and 500,000 steel cavalry behind him. Those were too far away from the common people. What the common people remembered the most in his past experience was that when the enemy country invaded, they kidnapped 30,000 wounded soldiers, women, and children at the border. After enslaving and ravaging them, they were all killed. The whole country was shocked. Xiahou Qing, the crown prince of Nanping, fought for his father and won a great victory at the foot of White Wolf Mountain. He also chopped off the heads of the 30,000 surrendered soldiers and became famous in the 9 provinces. Some people were born to be looked up to. Xiahou Qing was not only looked up to, but also revered. Xiahou Qing walked over and protected Ning Shu behind him. He said calmly, "Little Shu, if you have anything to say, just say it. With me here, I'll see who dares to stop you today." Chapter 509. Ning Shu raises her head and looks at the back of the man in front of her seriously. His skin is pale all year round. He is tall and thin. A jade belt is wrapped around his waist. It is not much thicker than her. She can't see, her tongue can't taste, and her nose can't smell. He looks like a patient who will collapse at any time. However, he is like an indestructible wall that blocks all the wind and rain in the world for her. It seems that there is no need to be afraid anymore. There is nothing to be afraid of. In front of her eyes, thousands of fragments are pieced together. The collapsed part of her heart is finally fully awakened at this moment. Slowly, it returns to its original position. Ning Shu closes her eyes and opens them again. There is a glimmer of light in her eyes. Her voice is low but firm, the shape, is wrong. It shouldn't be like this. Xiahou Qing's heart moves. He calls, "Huimo." Huimo takes the medicine bottle and puts on the gloves. He turns his head and takes a deep breath. Then, he holds it. Enduring the ecstasy of the night fragrance exuding from the corpses, he goes over to check the corpses. After a closer look, he really finds something wrong. Lady Ning is right. There is indeed something wrong with these corpses. The first person who was bitten to death by a beast, his skin and flesh are split open and stiff. If he was bitten to death when he was alive, the wound would not appear like this. Instead, it would shrink. The same is true for the third one. As for the second one who drowned, if he really drowned, he must open his mouth and scream desperately when he was struggling to breathe in some sand. But this corpse only has a little sand near his mouth and nose. After opening his throat, there is no sand in his throat. He must have been murdered and thrown into the river. Huimo scratches his head, because the death is too ugly and the smell is too ecstasy. I didn't look carefully just now. The one who asks is a pawn shop owner in town. You mean that the 3 of them were murdered and deliberately made like this? Why would the murderer do that? Huimo had helped Ning Shu with 3 cases in a row, so he had learned something. Xiao Zhangping was watching from the side, so he deliberately wanted to show off his skills. There are only a few reasons. First, to destroy the corpse, reduce the clues, and hide the identity of the murderer. Second, to create panic and deliberately choose a special day like the Mystery Maiden Day to frame others, and the unlucky people who were framed are us. Third, to rule out the possibility that there is a deep hatred. Killing people is not enough, so he deliberately tortured the corpse to vent his anger. The more terrible the corpse is, the more satisfied the murderer will be. Isn't that right, Lady Ning? He looked like a big peacock with its tail open. He blushed and raised his head, deliberately showing off his most beautiful feathers. Looking at his bravado, Ning Shu couldn't help but laugh. She lowered her head and thought for a moment, then said, "There is another possibility." "What is it?" "These 3 people are the most honest and taciturn people in the town. Usually, when they talk to a girl, their faces will turn red. Except for the crippled 8th brother who married a wife, the other 2 can't even get married. How can they make enemies? Let alone such a murderer who kills without blinking an eye. The lame eighth brother's wife cried until she was out of breath. My husband was really a good man. I was born half disabled and couldn't have children. He never complained or held a grudge against me. He treated me as if I was his own flesh and blood. Why did I die so miserably? Oh God, please take me away too. That's right. Our Baija town has been here for generations. We've watched each other grow up. Who doesn't know each other? They're all good people. Every time I go to the butcher's to buy meat, he always gives me 2 extra coins. When my handkerchief fell into the river, it was Lai Si who helped me get it out. That's right. If it is really murder, why did 3 people die last year? The year before last. Could it be? From the discussion of the townspeople, Ning Shu quickly picked out the threads one by one and sorted them out. When the discussion stopped, she began to ask questions. She asked 3 questions. You, the town, are all surnamed by. Every year, 3 people die. When did it start? Who is it? Who is the 3rd brother of Bai? Chapter 5:10. After Ning Shu asked the 3 questions, the chattering crowd suddenly became silent, as if they had touched upon some unspeakable secret. Everyone kept their mouths shut and did not dare to make a sound. Xiahou Qing curled up the corners of his mouth and smiled. It seems that you are not in a hurry to catch the murderer, nor are you afraid that he will swing his axe again next year, nor are you afraid that his hand will fall on your necks to claim your lives. In that case, please do as you wish. Jussi, we are not welcome here. Go back to the inn and pack up your things. We will leave immediately. Prince Xiahou, please wait. The white-haired mayor hurriedly chased after them and urged them to stay. His face revealed a hesitant expression. After struggling for a long time, he finally sighed and told them the whole story. Fine, this old man will answer you. The first question is, the people of our Baija town are surnamed Bai. Hundreds of years ago, our ancestors were once a huge clan. Our clan was flourishing and had great prestige. Later, we were framed and betrayed by scoundrels. We were expelled from our hometown and migrated to this land. After that, we set down an ancestral rule: never trust a person of a different race easily, and never marry a person of a different race. If there is a disobedient person, he will be whipped, deprived of his family name, and driven out of Baija town. He will never be able to step foot in this town. After hearing a few words, Hui Mo was shocked. You are all surnamed Bai. Then what about your marriage? Even if they don't share the same ancestor, if this goes on for a long time, the people in your town will become blood relatives within a few generations. With more relatives on top of each other, the children born will most likely be crippled. How can this continue? Ning Shu and Xiahou Qing could not help but secretly frown. No wonder there were lame Lao Ba, Lai Tu Si, and women who could not have children. It was not a coincidence, but a problem in the bloodline of the people here. The people of Baija town immediately roared, "What do you know? Our ancestors set this ancestral rule to ensure the unity of our community, to protect our bloodline from being contaminated by outsiders, and to prevent us from being betrayed and to survive in peace for thousands of years. As for our descendants, we have not perished for hundreds of years. Don't talk nonsense here and offend our ancestors." Facing this group of ignorant people, Hui Mo was dumbfounded. He didn't know what to say. You are simply. Josie pulled him back and said in a low voice, "Summer insects can't talk about ice. Hundreds of years of thinking are deeply rooted. How can a few words wake them up? Let's keep listening." Hui Mo could only shut his mouth angrily and squat to the side to sulk. Xiahou Qing said, "My imperial bodyguard is young and impetuous. He doesn't know anything and has offended you. Please don't take it to heart. Old mister, please continue." The mayor continued, "The second problem is that 3 people die every year. It started 3 years ago. This year, all of you have seen it with your own eyes, so I won't repeat it. The 3 who died last year were foreigners, like you, who came to our town to rest. They were in the fur trade. Although it is forbidden here to marry outside the family name, we still need these people to come to town to trade with us for things like food, clothing, and utensils. Come to think of it, those fur traders were our regular customers. They would come here once every month for 2 or 3 days each time. Nothing happened before, but something happened to them last year. They died as strangely as Lai Tu-Si and the others. The constables from the county came to investigate the case, but they couldn't find anything after a long time. That's why we spread the news that Her Majesty Xian Nyu was angry." Ning Shu asked, "First, what about last year?" The mayor was silent for a moment before he said, "It was my son and my grandchildren who died." Ning Shu looked up in surprise. Chapter 5:11. The mayor wiped his face and said with difficulty, "The first one to die was my descendant. After I married my wife, I couldn't have a child for many years. It wasn't until I was 30 years old that we finally had our first child. Unexpectedly, he died of illness when he was 4 or 5 years old. A few years later, we gave birth to another child, but he died of a cold. It wasn't until we were 40 that we finally had our third child. We raised him like a treasure and he grew up to be a strong and smart boy. After that, we arranged for his marriage and gave birth to a grandson and a granddaughter. I thought that my life was finally complete with 3 generations under the same roof. I didn't expect that 3 years ago, my son went out for a business trip and got sick again. He was so sick that he became muddle-headed and lost his mind. We watched over him day and night, fearing that something would happen to him. But on the day of the Mystery Maiden Festival, I had to preside over the ceremony and couldn't leave. So, I drugged him and locked him in the house. But I didn't expect that he still ran out and jumped into the well with his son and daughter. When I came back, his body floated up. My son, my family's bloodline was completely cut off." The old mayor cried blood with every word. Everyone who heard it was sad. A soft-hearted woman wiped his tears for him. "It's all by Lao San's fault. It's all his fault for breaking the ancestral rules and bringing a foreign woman back to the town. That's why there was such a disaster later. That bastard deserved to die." Hearing the name by Lao San again, Ning Shu pulled Xiahou Qing's sleeve. Xiahou Qing understood and asked again for her, "Who is this by Lao San?" The woman said, "Oh, him, he was originally one of the smartest youngsters in our town. His parents passed away early, and the townspeople pitied him. They helped each other to raise him up, providing him with a mouthful of rice and a piece of cloth. Especially the mayor, he took care of him and treated him like half a son. The mayor personally taught him how to read and write. He was the first one in our town to go out to take the imperial examination. Everyone treated him as a literary star. But who would have thought that when he grew up, he would actually do such a thing? He went out to take the high scholar examination and actually got together with a woman from another tribe. Not only did he get together with her, he even brought her back to town to perform the wedding ceremony." Xiao Zhangping listened attentively and couldn't help but ask, "What happened later? What did you do to him? For hundreds of years, he has betrayed the teachings of the ancestors. Such a vile creature naturally needs to be whipped and chased out of the town. But I didn't expect that even so, they still couldn't stop the bad luck of our town. Not long after they left, the mayor's son fell ill, and then that incident happened during the Mystic Maiden Festival. After that, strange things kept happening until now. Goddess Xian Nyu, please calm down. Don't be angry anymore and let us live. The townspeople knelt and kowtowed in the direction of the statue. These ignorant people had no idea what was going on, and what these mysterious things were all about. When they were at their wits' end, they could only pray again and again to the gods that they had faithfully believed in since they were born for a sliver of mercy. As for whether it was useful or not, what could they do? Ning Shu could not comment on these people's actions. She could only continue to ask, "Bai Lao San, where is he?" The townspeople laughed mockingly and said sarcastically, "Of course he's dead. They violated the rules of the clan, so how could the ancestors forgive them?" On the day of the leader's son's funeral, he brought that foreign woman back to pay respects, but we jointly drove them out. Not long after that, we heard the news of their sudden death. It was said that they were poisoned, and their deaths were particularly tragic. No one could collect their bodies. In the end, our mayor was soft-hearted and came forward to take care of their family's funeral. His body was buried in the wild mountain outside the town, and it could be said that he was guarding the family. As for the foreign woman and her child, they were sent back to their original place. If you ask me, the mayor is too kind. Such an unfilial descendant who disobeyed the ancestors, a traitor to the whole Bai town, should be ground to ashes and fed to the animals. Chapter 5:12. The sparse white hair on the mayor's head was lifted by the wind, like a dead branch buried in the yellow soil. There was not a single living leaf, only broken meridians. He smiled bitterly for a while and shook his head. Dead people don't owe anything. No matter what he did wrong, it's all in the past. There's no need to mention it again. We watched him grow up with our own eyes. He was a good child in my eyes, just like my good-for-nothing son. The townspeople bowed their heads. "My condolences, Mayor." An old man who spoke before said to Ning Shu and others, "You just said that you could help us find the murderer who killed the lay mate and the others. But we've wasted so much time talking. Have you found anything? You're not lying to us, are you?" "That's right. We've told you everything you want to know. If you don't give us an explanation, we don't care if you're the crown prince or the emperor of heaven. Although the people of Baijia town are all country bumpkins, we still have guts." Facing the increasingly noisy questioning of the crowd, Ning Shu kept her head down and thought quietly without saying anything. Then she slowly walked to the lay mate's wife, who was crying so hard that she almost fainted. "Your husband didn't come. Why didn't you know?" The woman covered her face with tears falling from her fingers. "He was going to come. Last night, when we were chatting, he said that he would go to the mystic fairy to pray for his good brother, the deceased young master of the mayor's family. He prayed that the mystic fairy would bless him with a good family in the next life. This morning, when we were about to set off, he suddenly said that someone was looking for him for something urgent and asked me to go first. He quickly followed me. Who knew that when I went to the mystic fairy's temple and waited for a long time, he didn't come? Then I heard this bad news." She cried and cried until she couldn't hold on anymore and fainted. Everyone hurried to help her. Xiahou Qing said softly in her ear, "Little Shu, do you have an idea in your mind?" Ning Shu nodded, "Yes, a guess. However, I have one last question." Xiahou said, "Little Shu, do you want to ask about the relationship between the 3 dead people in front of you and the deceased son of the mayor?" Having her thoughts guessed, Ning Shu's eyes lit up like stars. "Yes, that's right." "How do you know?" Xiahou Qing's lips slightly raised, revealing a mysterious smile. His slightly cold fingertips lightly touched the tip of her nose. "I am the roundworm in Xiao Shu's stomach. Naturally, I know everything. Let me ask for you." Xiahou Qing's voice was as clear as jade. He asked the last question for Ning Shu. Soon, someone said, they're about the same age and grew up together. Their relationship is pretty good. A few years ago, when Pork Mantis lost his wife, he was depressed and drank all day long. He wasn't in the mood to do business and turned himself into something neither human nor ghost. I even saw Cripple Old Ba and the others trying to persuade him. Among them was the son of the mayor's family. Their relationship should be good. Why are you asking this question? Is it related to this case? It's related. After getting the answer to her last question, the mess in Ning Shu's heart was finally solved. She saw the truth that was hidden at the core of the mess. I know who the murderer is. Who on earth is it? Not only the townspeople of Baijia town, but also all the people present were looking at her. They were eagerly looking forward to the final answer that kept them in suspense. Ning Shu, don't keep us guessing. Tell us quickly. Who on earth is it? Xiao Zhangping was extremely curious. This was an unsolved case with no clues. 3 years had passed, and 6 of the 9 victims were dead. The 3 in front of him were also difficult to find any clues. How could she solve the case so quickly in such a short time? Ning Shu's eyes slid over the faces of everyone present. They were either curious, horrified, expectant or scared. In short, they were all wonderful. Even the old mayor who was about to die couldn't help but ask worriedly, who on earth is this cruel man? Is he hiding among us? Miss, please tell us quickly and solve our Baijia town's dilemma. Ning Shu's gaze was fixed on his face that was full of wrinkles, on his turbid and dim eyeballs, and on each of his wrinkles that varied in depth. She said, Here, here, here. It's you. Chapter 5:13. Her words were like cold water dripping into boiling oil, instantly arousing countless crackling noises. Inside and outside the scene, thousands of townspeople instantly broke out in violent resistance. What nonsense are you talking about? Our mayor has always been benevolent and benevolent. He protects the entire Baijia town and everyone in the town. How could he be that terrible murderer? It must be that you don't have the ability to find the murderer, so you don't want to harm him. Apologize to our mayor immediately, or we'll make sure you're not going to get away with it. Yes. How could it be the mayor? It's ridiculous. This girl is bold and presumptuous. How dare she slander the mayor? Beat her to death. Beat her to death. The mayor shook his head with a wry smile and stretched out his arms to help Ning Shu calm down the anger of the crowd. Everyone, don't be angry. This child is still young and probably doesn't know anything. As the saying goes, children's words carry no harm. Don't take it to heart. This person is the Crown Prince of Nanping Wang. He has also helped the people of Great Yu to win the war and take revenge. Even if it is for his sake, everyone should restrain themselves. Xiahou Shizi, this old man knows that you all want to help our Baijia town, but this case is complicated and unpredictable, so there is no need to trouble you. Please go back, this old man will personally escort you and ensure that you leave here safe and sound. His action of repaying evil with good made Xiao Zhangping couldn't help but whisper in Huemo's ear. This mayor looks very kind. How could it be him? Could it be that Ning Shu was seriously injured and even her head was injured, so she thought wrong? Facing the crowd and thousands of angry eyes, Ning Shu was afraid but not timid. She clenched Xiahou Qing's hand and absorbed his strength. She looked at the mayor and said with great certainty again, I said, it's right. The murderer is you. The mayor sighed and said with great sadness, why are you so paranoid? Is it because this old man was disrespectful to you at the beginning, so I annoyed you? Well, as you said, if these murders were really done by me, doesn't it mean that I killed my own children and grandchildren with my own hands? Don't forget, the people who died in the first year were my children and grandchildren. May I ask, miss, how did I lose my mind and end my bloodline? Ning Shu said, you are the murderer. But those who were killed did not include your descendants. The ones you really killed were the 3 furs in front of you, the 3 furs from last year, and old Third Bai's family. Unknowingly, the stuttering in her speech grew less and less, and she gradually became fluent. Moreover, her gaze grew calmer and firmer as if she'd shed all the dirt on her body and found herself once more. As if he had heard some nonsense, the mayor's benevolent face suddenly turned cold. He sneered and said, what this young lady said is interesting. You said that this old man is the murderer, and also said that I didn't kill my sons and grandsons. Then how did they die? Could it be an accident? Moreover, I watched the crippled 8th brother and the others grow up. They were good friends with my son. After my son died, I treated them as half of my sons. There was no enmity between us, so why would I kill them? Could it be that I'm also crazy? Ning Shu was not afraid of him. As long as she was doing what she thought was right, as long as the person next to her was holding her hand, she was full of courage. You are not crazy. On the contrary, you have a plan, a destination, and spent 3 years to carefully arrange all of this. It's true that you had no enmity with them in the past, but ever since your son committed suicide, you've treated them as your greatest enemies in your life. That's because you believe that they were the ones who killed your son. Chapter 5:14. The mayor's expression became more and more absurd. He almost mocked, my son committed suicide. Why would he commit suicide for no reason? He was indeed ill at that time, but under our careful care, he took medicine every day and recovered more than half of his condition. All the doctors in the town knew about this. Why would he commit suicide at that critical moment? Moreover, he even dragged his young son and daughter with him. There was a trace of sorrow in Ning Shu's voice. It was as if she was reminiscing the memory of another brave person across an unfathomable space and time. Because he knew that Baijia town was wrong. All of you were wrong. If my guess is correct, the cause of all this should be the 3rd brother of the Bai family, who was the first to leave this place and participate in the imperial examination. The people who were locked in the cage of Baijia town all their lives had no way to know the outside world. People who had been imprisoned in the old order for too long did not realize that the order was a cage. It was a rope that tied them up, a knife that cut off their legs, not allowing them to take a step out of this place. Over time, they mistakenly thought that the order was a golden bell that protected them. In the end, even they themselves became part of the cage, imprisoning more people. However, one day, one of the people who were sleeping suddenly opened his eyes. He broke the fence, broke the rope, and saw another vast world. He knew the truth of all things. Then, he returned to the cage with the truth. He wanted to wake up all the people who were sleeping in the cage and give them a new life. He did not expect that he would become the target of public criticism. He was despised by tens of thousands of people and was kicked out of the iron prison with bruises all over his body. There was only one person left, and that was the mayor's son. Because he missed his former partner, he went out of the town with the fur merchant who visited the town and found his close friend. After a deep conversation, his chaotic mind was awakened. He finally realized why the people in their town were so different from the people outside. From the ancestors to the younger generation, more and more of the next generation became disabled, dull, and even died early from illness. Even his own children were not so healthy. With a heart full of resentment, he returned to the town and had a deep discussion with his father, who was the mayor. He wanted to change the current situation of Bai town and give the people here a future, as well as a future for their entire clan. However, he didn't expect that his new and correct way of thinking would be severely reprimanded by his father. He told him that he absolutely shouldn't be delusional and change the rules established by his ancestors over hundreds of years. Otherwise, he would become the sinner of the entire family. However, he was locked up by his father with the excuse of illness and insanity. Every day, he was forced to drink bowl after bowl of black medicine like an animal. His mind, which he thought was awake, was not so clear anymore. Therefore, in his sorrow and despair, on the lively Mystery Lady Festival 3 years ago, he broke through the shackles of his parents and jumped into the well with his immature children. With his life as a drumstick, he fiercely rebelled against the ridiculous family rules. He thought that his death would always be a little bit useful and could at least wake up a few people who were not so sleepy. However, he didn't expect that not only did it not have any effect, but it was also used to whitewash the rules of the ancestors and become another evidence of the death of those who violated it. After experiencing the tragedy of his son's death, his father didn't have a trace of awakening. Instead, he blamed Bai Lao San, who was the first to wake up, and used their former relationship to poison his whole family. Then, he pretended to be a Maitreya. With the heart of Buddha, the family of 3 couldn't be buried together and couldn't be reunited for generations. Then, in the 3rd year, it was those fur traders who took his son out of the town. Finally, it was now. Ning Shu finished her analysis and narration intermittently, and finally said, "Mayor, these are all my conjectures based on what you said just now. Originally, I was still a little uncertain. Until just now, when you were wiping your tears, you revealed a piece of your sleeve, and there was a water plant on it." Shi Yan's eyes were sharp, and he immediately went to take a look. There is really a water plant. Could it be that when you killed Lai Tu-Si, you threw his body into the river and got it on the water? The old mayor's calm face finally changed, and he hurriedly pulled back his sleeve. But Ning Shu refused to stop and continued to analyze more evidence. Just now, the statue of Xian Nyu shed tears of blood. I went closer and smelled it. There was a fishy smell in the blood. It should be the smell of water plant. When you killed Lai Tu-Si, time was tight. You had to rush back to arrange the ceremony, so you didn't have time to wash your hands and change clothes. Then, you mixed the fishy smell with the blood and added the wax, which condensed into a lump. And the eyes of the statue are moving. You hid the blood wax behind it and exposed it to the sun for a long time. It melted, creating the illusion that the statue shed tears of blood. Chapter 5:15. Without fear, Ning Shu met everyone's astonished eyes and said, "If you still have doubts, just check the list of people who recently bought white wax in the town." The townspeople were shocked by her outrageous speculation. They looked at each other in disbelief. Although they were ignorant, they still understood human language. This girl clearly didn't experience the things that happened in their Baijia town in the past 3 years, but she was able to speculate without a single mistake. Could it be that the murderer was really the mayor? But he was the mayor. He was the leader of the Bai family, the backbone of the entire Baijia town, and also the living rule of the Baijia town in the eyes of thousands of townspeople. How could it be? The mayor's expression was about to crack, but he forcefully glued it back together. He refused to admit defeat easily, as if he was betting on his godlike status in the townspeople's hearts. Suddenly, a weak voice came from the crowd and said timidly, "Mayor, the mayor did come to my shop to buy white wax 5 days ago, the day when the taut string finally broke. The mask on the mayor's face completely broke into pieces." He suddenly looked back and panted violently. "I bought the white wax to pay tribute to my dead descendants. They died on this very day. Can't I buy 2 white wax to mourn them? Don't fall into the trap of outsiders. They are the executioners sent by the imperial court to destroy us." This was a tug of war, and it had reached the most critical moment. He was still struggling, but Ning Shu didn't intend to stop. Let's put the white wax matter aside for now. Let's talk about the wooden ladder in the mystic goddess temple. That statue is 30 feet tall. If you want to do something to the statue's eyeballs, you won't be able to reach that high unless you're an expert. So, the only way is to make a tall wooden ladder in advance. The skin on the mayor's cheeks twitched, and his face turned a deathly pale. He moved his lips and was about to say something to make up for it when the townsfolk, who already knew what was going on, beat him to it. Ah! Half a month ago, the mayor did order a wooden ladder from me, and the higher the better. You should know that the taller the ladder was, the more unstable the base would be, and the more difficult it would be to make it. So, I asked the mayor why he wanted such a tall wooden ladder. At that time, the mayor said that the temple of the mystic fairy empress had been in disrepair for a long time, and the eaves were damaged. He ordered me to build it carefully and not make any mistakes. When I heard that it was an important matter, I didn't sleep for a few days. So, I rushed out the wooden ladder and moved to Xian Nu Peak with the mayor. There was no need to say anything else. The truth of the matter had come to light. Then, more clues came out naturally, and every one of them was aimed at the mayor. 3 years ago, not long after the death of the mayor's son, the mayor came to my medicine shop and bought a lot of cinnabar and arsenic. I asked the mayor why he wanted these things. The mayor said that after the death of the young master, his soul was restless, and he often told him in his dreams that he was haunted by evil spirits. So, he bought those things and drew a few talismans and pasted them in front of the young master's tomb to protect him in his death. Could it be that, those things killed by Lao San and his family? Last year, those fur traders came to do business here, and they stayed in my inn. They didn't plan to stay until the Mystic Goddess Festival. Somehow, when the mayor passed by, he greeted them and talked to them, and they suddenly changed their minds and stayed. After that, I don't know what happened, but the 3 of them suddenly died on the same day. Even my family's inn mysteriously caught fire and burned to the ground. Fortunately, I ran away quickly, otherwise I would have met the King of Hell. Chapter 5:16. There was no need to listen to any more words. When everyone opened their eyes, no matter how thick the fog was, it could not hide the hidden truth behind it. Crippled old Eight's wife had just fainted from crying and was then strangled. Now that she heard everyone's gossip, she took a deep breath and tightly clutched her chest. She looked at the mayor, who she had always respected like a father, as if she had seen an evil ghost. You really did it? Then why did you kill my husband and the others? They have always been honest. They have never done anything bad, and they have never done anything wrong to you. The mayor's facade of benevolence and kindness for many years was completely torn off today. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like he had gone crazy. He roared in a very terrifying voice, "Who said they didn't do anything wrong to me? 3 years ago, on that morning, they made the biggest mistake, and that was to disobey my orders and release my son while I and my wife were preparing for the ceremony. If they hadn't released him, how could he have had the chance to jump into the well? Yes. What you said just now was right. I did kill those people, but so what? They all deserve to die. If it weren't for them, my son wouldn't have been possessed. Each of them was an evil ghost sent by the Azura of Hell. They bewitched my son and pushed him to that dead end." The truth was completely revealed. Everyone was shocked and took a few steps back, not daring to accept the truth in front of them. But no matter how difficult it was to accept, they had to accept it. Crippled old Eight's wife was so frightened that her whole body trembled. She cried for the injustice of her innocent husband, but my husband and the others released the young master because they were good friends who grew up together. When they saw him in pain, they wanted to help him, for his own good. The mayor fiercely said, "Shut up. You ignorant idiots, how do you know what's good for him? In the entire Baija town, only I work hard every day, for the sake of our town, to think of ways to protect each and every one of you. Only I know what's good for you, for him." Looking at his face full of madness, Ning Shu frowned and said, "Have you ever thought that what you think is good is actually not really good? Maybe crippled old eighth is not wrong, and the one who is wrong is you. How is this possible?" The mayor roared, "Our ancestors have lived like this for hundreds of years. How can it be wrong? How am I wrong? They were betrayed and had nowhere else to go. They had no choice but to bring their entire clan to this land. They suffered a lot and shed a lot of blood to build a foundation for us, creating a path for us to survive. In order to protect the prosperity of the entire clan, they set an iron law that forbade intermarriage with other clans. For more than a dozen generations, we have always followed this pattern. Men plowed and women weaved. We were harmonious and united, supporting each other. No one had any disloyalty. We should have continued to walk on this path, following the rules and living well, but who would have thought that our clan would give birth to a beast like Bai Lao San? The biggest mistake I've made in my life was being soft-hearted. I couldn't resist his pleas and let him out of the town. Half a year later, he brought this woman from a different race back from the outside, and as if someone had cast a spell on him, he spoke crazily in the town all day long, slandering the ancestors and violating the clan rules. He said something about how we can't continue like this, otherwise the Bai clan will definitely face extinction in the near future. Ridiculous, simply ridiculous. We have lived well for so many generations. In recent years, our luck has been bad, and some of our children have been born with disabilities. That is also because the gods have sensed the existence of people like him in advance and have punished him. As long as we wholeheartedly admit our mistakes, kneel and pray, we will definitely be able to resolve the crisis. But no matter how I persuaded him, he was stubborn and became more and more stubborn. What the ancestors said was indeed correct. If we intermarry with other clans, we will definitely be framed by them. That woman from a different race is the main culprit. His stubborn way of thinking made Ren Xing, like Xiao Zhangping, somewhat flabbergasted. She hesitantly asked, "Then what happened? How did you treat Bai Lao San?" The mayor sneered and turned his head to look at her. "Naturally, we used the clan rules, beat him and that woman half to death, expelled them from the town, and burned down their ancestral home, never allowing them to take a single step in for the rest of their lives." His eyes were cold and filled with venom, as well as extreme grief and pain. The two different emotions twisted his entire being. "But I didn't expect that before he left, he somehow infected my son with the strange race's black magic, causing my son to be brave enough to leave the town to save him. When he came back half a month later, he had also become like that. That was the only son I had hoped for so many years, the only son who survived. He was forcibly harmed by them. I spent countless words to persuade him, to wake him up, but it was no use. He even clamored to wake everyone here, and if it didn't work, he would completely leave this town. I had no choice but to lock him up in the room, not allowing him to take a single step out of the door. Then, I asked the best doctor in the clan to prescribe medicine for him, and every day, I personally brewed it and fed it to him. I have lived to this age for nothing. I only hope that he can return to his original self, to become the good son that I had raised in the palm of my hand since he was a child. For more than 2 months, I didn't dare to slack off, and I didn't dare to sleep soundly for fear that he would escape. Finally, the medicine took effect, and he became more and more obedient, no longer making noise, and was extremely obedient. Until the Mystic Maiden Festival, I thought that he would soon recover, and I didn't have to worry anymore. So, I locked the door and took the old woman out to prepare for the festival, but who would have thought that Cripple Old 8 and the others would act on their own and let my son out, stimulating his madness, causing him to go crazy again. He personally strangled his 2 children to death, and then dragged their bodies into the well. You tell me, among so many people, which one of them shouldn't be killed? I wholeheartedly devoted myself to our town, but they colluded to betray me. They should all die, all of them should go to hell. Chapter 5:17. Until now, the old man still didn't realize who was wrong. Looking at the old man's ferocious face, Wang had goosebumps all over his body even though it was a hot day. He rubbed his goosebumps and pulled the frightened Xiao Zhangping behind him. This old man is seriously ill. It's too scary. Princess, hide behind him. Don't be scared by this madman. Holding a flower and smiling, the Buddha, who could save all living beings, uncovered his golden face. No one expected that there was a demon hidden inside. Even the townspeople of Baijia town were frightened. Ning Shu frowned. It was like playing the lute to a cow to deal with such a stubborn person. Xiao Qing squeezed her hand and signaled her to leave the rest to him. Today, he was wearing a blue robe, and the veil hat on his head was put on by Ning Shu. Through the veil, his face was faintly discernible. Such a dress made him look like an immortal. As long as he stood there, he was born with a natural aura, which made people not dare to act rashly. When he sneered in a low voice, people's souls trembled. He said, "You said that you were following the rules in order to protect the stability of this place. It sounds dignified, but I'm afraid it's not completely true. You committed 3 murder cases and 9 lives under the banner of doing good for everyone. In fact, you were just defending your own authority." The mayor immediately denied, "You're talking nonsense." I didn't. Didn't you?" When you were in a hurry to deny it, there was an obvious pause in the middle. You were short of breath and your throat was trembling. Isn't that a sign of your guilty conscience? These subtle reactions may escape the eyes of others, but you underestimated me. Xiao Qing's smile deepened, but at the same time, it became colder. He was still standing in the same place indifferently, but the old mayor was forced to step back for some reason. For so many years, you've been holding on to the authority passed down from your ancestors. You've been sitting on the mayor's throne, enjoying the respect and obedience of the people in the town. On this small piece of land, you are like an uncrowned king. On the surface, the statue on the Xiannu Peak is your religion, but in reality, you are the one who controls the hearts of the people. Everyone has to do as you say. Even walking out of the town gate requires your permission. You have turned all the people in this town into marionettes that you can control as you please. You have always been extremely satisfied with your rule, until the appearance of Bai Lao San. You personally raised a brat who was still wet behind the ears, but unexpectedly, he didn't become another one of your puppets. Instead, he developed his own thoughts and even clamored about overturning the rules of his ancestors. That deeply touched your reverse scale. Because to you, what he wants to overturn isn't just a rigid rule, but the order you use to control the entire race. That was a set of mythical golden rules that had been passed down for 100 years. It had long been the representative of the authority of every mayor. Breaking one of them meant that your authority was declining day by day, and your brilliance was completely gone. You are incomparably angry and incomparably fearful. You are afraid that once one person succeeded in overturning the iron rule, the second and the third would swarm up. Then what would you be as the mayor? So you tried everything to strangle the first sprout before it was unearthed. You thought you had succeeded, but before you had time to laugh, your own son was cut off from the bottom of the cauldron and became the second sprout. And this sprout couldn't be stopped anymore and completely broke out. Perhaps you still use that set of clichés to appeal, saying that you only wanted revenge out of grief and anger. But was that really the case? If you only wanted to vent your anger, you didn't have to spread all kinds of rumors and slander after killing the fur merchant and lie Tusi to frame Xian New Goddess. You also didn't have to think of ways to humiliate their corpses after killing them. Also, you deliberately created the bloody tears of Xian New Goddess and spread the appearance of Xian New Goddess. The root of all these little tricks was still the same purpose, to maintain the authority of Xian New Goddess, to maintain the authority of the order, and finally, to maintain your own authority. You said that you wholeheartedly wanted to protect the people of the town, but weren't Lai Tusi and the others your people? It's not an unforgivable mistake to make a mistake out of kindness and cause the death of the young master. However, when you took advantage of their trust in you and killed them, why did you deliberately forget that they were also the people of the Baijia town? Shut up, no matter how many excuses you have, you can't hide your cold-bloodedness, hypocrisy, and greed. Chapter 5:18. Xiahou Qing finally said, "Your son did not die in the hands of others, but died because of your obsession. You killed your own children and grandchildren with your own hands." The mayor felt as if he had been struck by lightning. No matter how much he quibbled, under Xiahou Qing's questioning, he became pale and powerless. He was like a dying fish lying on the shore, trying his best to open his mouth. His face was ashen as he staggered back. I. It's not like this, son. I didn't kill you. I didn't do anything wrong, I didn't do anything wrong. He blankly raised his head and saw Lai Tusi's bulging eyes coldly looking at him, as if he was asking for his life. The mayor's throat made a cracking sound as he fell to the ground and fainted. Things had developed to this point. The case had been solved. After 3 years of waiting, the dust had finally settled. The townspeople looked at each other in dismay, not knowing what to do next. They might be ignorant, but the majority of them still maintained a simple and pure heart. 9 lives had been lost, and more than half of them were their own children and grandchildren. This was the first time in history that they had wavered in their faith, and after their faith was shaken, they were deeply at a loss. Looking at the unconscious man on the ground, Shi Yan felt very happy in his heart. He asked, "Shi Ziyi, how should we deal with this old man?" Xiahou Qing said, "Inform the prefectural government and the county government officials to come and arrest him. We have already taken care of enough here." "Yes, your subordinate has received the order." Shi Yan lazily cupped his fists. After walking halfway, he turned back and pulled Zigui with him. He said, "The mountain is far away, and there are jackals and wolves on the road. He is afraid and lonely." Zigui gave him a big supercilious look. In the end, he reluctantly followed him. Jiu Si and the others first took the unconscious old mayor away and temporarily locked him up. After the mayor finished dealing with the few innocent victims, a reputable elder stepped forward and let out a long sigh. He arranged for the corpses to be washed and buried in the ground for them to rest in peace. Looking at the broken and humiliated corpses being covered with a layer of rags and slowly carried away, Ning Shu was silent for a long time. Xiahou Qing held her hand and said softly, "What are you thinking about, Xiao Shu?" Ning Shu's gaze was somewhat empty as she muttered, "They are all good people. Not only cripple old 8, Lai Tu Si, Pork Mantis, but also Bai Lao San, the mayor's son, and even the 3 fur merchants. None of them were bad people, but why did the outcome turn out like this?" She felt so sad. Xiahou Qing said, "Xiao Shu is feeling aggrieved for them. Why is it that they have never done anything bad, yet they are not rewarded?" Ning Shu nodded silently. "Yes," said he, "their goodness and bravery have not been in vain. Providence has arranged for them to meet us, and you, little Shu. If you hadn't solved this mystery, they would most likely have ended up like the previous 2 unsolved cases. They would have been implicated by the mysterious theory of ghosts and gods, and would have died a worthless death. But you appeared here. Not only did you help them find the murderer, but you also exposed the ridiculous and harmful system here. You fulfilled the wishes of Bai Lao San and the others, so this should be the ultimate reward for their good deeds. They saw everything that happened in the human world and the netherworld. They must have no regrets and will laugh as they go to reincarnation, right? So, Xiao Shu, you don't have to worry about it. I'm very glad that we encountered this case. In this case, there is one heinous person, but there are 9 benevolent people. This just shows that there are more good people in this world and fewer evil people. The best way for a gentleman to walk the world is to ask for benevolence and get benevolence. Now their benevolence has been fulfilled, and we will continue our search. I'll go with you, okay? His voice was as soft as water, containing all things. Ning Shu was unknowingly wrapped in it. The beliefs that had been shattered on that rainy night were like broken butterfly wings, being glued back by the golden fragments. She tried to flap her wings, which were like a layer of armor, becoming more indestructible. She slowly raised the corner of her mouth, showing a very bright smile. It was like a flaming pomegranate flower in June, bright and beautiful. Then, she put her forehead on his neck, nodded hard, and said, yes. On the side, Hui Mo, who was listening in the corner, was puzzled. He scratched his head and said, it's rare for young Master Shitzi to talk so much in one breath today. He had been following him for 10 years. In his impression, young Master Shitzi had always been a man of few words, especially when it came to showing off. He had never been interested in this kind of thing. Did the sun rise from the west today? No. Don't you know why birds take out their most beautiful feathers when they seek a mate? Jiu Si faintly cast a glance at him and continued to do his work. Hui Mo was left alone in the same place. He suddenly realized, you mean the peacock spreading its tail. It turns out that young Master Shitzi is such a man. He was so excited that his voice was too loud. Xiahou Qing, who was not far away, immediately showed a mysterious smile and said coldly, the population of the Baijia town is simple, and there is no specialized coroner. It's not easy to clean up the body of the pig. Hui Mo, you go and help. Remember, this is a good person who died in vain. You must be respectful and cautious. Do not neglect, and do not leave a trace of filth. Hui Mo felt like he was struck by lightning. Chapter 519. Outside the Coffin Manor, Hui Mo looks at the door that he doesn't want to step into. He wants to go back to the time before and slap himself. Who told you to talk too much? Who told you to talk too much? This is the price you have to pay for talking too much. Looking at his infinitely sad expression, Xiao Zhangping couldn't help but laugh out loud. Hui Mo looked at her pitifully, and there was no need for words to express his begging. Xiao Zhangping stops smiling and raises her chin slightly. Don't even think about it. I'm a princess. I won't go in with you even if I die. Hui Mo lowers his head in disappointment and sighs. He opens the door and walks in. He looks back 3 times. He looked exactly like a homeless puppy. He was born with the air of a candid youth, and his eyes were exceptionally clear, as if they were shining. In the past few years, he had grown very tall, only about an inch shorter than Xiahou Qing, and he was still growing. Wherever he went, people would praise him with the phrase, "Which family's handsome young man?" Being stared at by such eyes, Xiao Zhangping doesn't know why, but she can't help but turn her head. When Hui Mo's figure is about to disappear into the door, she impulsively says, "Hurry up. I'll wait for you for 2 hours at most. I'm telling you, if you still don't come out after the time is up, I'll leave by myself. I won't wait for you." In the Coffin Manor, Hui Mo's eyes suddenly light up. He smiles brightly as if he has secretly eaten honey. He suddenly feels that the night fragrance of the corpse in front of him is not smelly anymore. It is fresh and elegant, refreshing. He quickly put on his gloves and covered his face with a cloth, then shouted, "Good, good, good. Your Highness, I dare not to disobey your order." He. In the end, Jusi helped Xiaoqing to change clothes and take a bath. The large pool was filled with a thick medicinal fragrance. As soon as Xiaoqing entered the pool, he felt a stinging pain where he was soaked in the medicinal bath. He frowned slightly, silently enduring the pain of thousands of needles attaching to his body. His plum blossom kiss was already incurable. Every day, the fourth petal would quietly grow and spread, like a leech clinging to his flesh and blood, greedily sucking away his life. Moreover, he clearly felt that his hearing was being devoured and nibbled away along with the appearance of the plum blossom petal. It was sometimes good and sometimes bad. Master Duan knew about his condition and had specially prepared this medicinal bath for him before he left. Even so, it could only delay the deterioration of his hearing as much as possible. As for when it would completely disappear, he closed his eyes and laughed at himself. Ever since he had gone blind for a few years, he had thought that he had made all the necessary preparations and that nothing could scare him anymore. However, he had overestimated himself. He was terrified, and even slightly terrified. What he was afraid of was not death, but if he lost his sense of hearing and became a walking corpse, then there would be no difference between his enemies and family members standing in front of him. He would not be able to sense her happiness, sadness, predicament, and despair. If that happened, Xiaoqing would really become a good-for-nothing. How would he face his Xiaoshu? He would be even worse than a cat or a dog. Seeing his self-deprecation, Jusi was burning inside. Your Highness, things have not reached the worst stage yet. There is still time. We will definitely be able to make it in time. Xiaoqing casually waved his hand. There is no need to comfort me. The heavens have their own conclusions. Why don't you talk about the current situation in the capital? 2 days ago, he had secretly sent Tianwen back to the capital to gather his spies and investigate. Every 4 hours, he would send a messenger pigeon. At the same time, he had used his identity as Nanping Prince to issue a death order. He had to do everything he could to protect Princess Heaxian and the Duke's estate before they returned to the capital. Remembering the latest secret letter he had just received, Jusi immediately became serious and solemnly said, Your Highness, the capital is in complete chaos. If the rain leaks into the house, hurry up and grab a basin to wait for the rain. If it leaks into the house, it will be a disaster. The blazing sun that was as hot as fire was instantly covered by layers of dark clouds. Under the blue dome of heaven, not a single ray of light could be seen. A huge gust of wind blew. The sky had completely changed. Xiaoqing had a complicated expression on his face. It was hard to fathom. After a moment, he seemed to have finally made a decision. He said coldly, We have to return to the capital as soon as possible. Jiu Si raised his head in astonishment. This is the darkest and most difficult time in the capital. It's impossible to guard against all kinds of open and covert attacks. This case has obviously involved the previous emperor and the previous dynasty. Now that the emperor is seriously ill and dying, the candidate for the crown prince is still undecided. It's too late for other people to avoid disaster. Not to mention, Lady Ning's injuries haven't healed and her mind hasn't fully recovered. You, heir presumptive, please reconsider. Xiaoqing's voice was low and firm. It's because she hasn't recovered that I have to make this decision for her. She treats her family like jewels and treasures, and the House of Duke is now like the most fragile boat in the storm. It can be crushed into powder by this power struggle at any time. If I take her to avoid disaster here, although I can protect her safety, when she wakes up one day, she will blame herself and regret it for the rest of her life. I don't want her to face that kind of day in the future, so even if it's like a man-eating vortex, I have to go back and take a look. Not to mention, the current situation in the capital must have something to do with that person. Now that my fourth plum petal has already grown halfway, will the fifth be far away? To me, death is only a matter of time. If I hide here now, I'll be ashamed of my title as the heir of Prince Nanping. Even if I walk to the end and can't save my own life, I have to drag that person into hell with me. Otherwise, how can I feel at ease leaving Xiaoshu alone in this dangerous human world? Chapter 521. Jussi heard that he had the intention to arrange for the future generations and felt sad. He knelt on the ground and said, "Shiziyi, I ask you not to say any more. You are a good person and will be able to turn misfortune into blessing. Moreover, Miss Ning is so dependent on you now. If you really die, what will Miss Ning do? Also, in our Wang Fu, Wang Yi and Wang Fei only have you. If they lose you, how sad will they be? How will Nanping Wang Fu survive? Therefore, whether it is for the future of the Wang Fu or for Miss Ning, I beg Shiziyi not to give up your life." Xiahou Qin didn't care and waved his hand. He smiled and said, "When I was 10 years old, I suddenly had a plum blossom kiss. I talked with my father once. If one day I can't protect Nanping Wang Fu, he will adopt a member of the royal family as his heir. He will inherit the hundreds of years of Nanping Wang Fu and protect every inch of land in Yunnan province. He will ensure that the people of Yunnan province live in peace and prosperity. This person is you." Jussi looked up in surprise. "Shiziyi." Ahem, Xiahou Qin coughed and revealed a secret that had been sealed for many years. "Jussi, you were originally from the bloodline of Emperor Gaozu's third son, King Lu. During the rebellion of the 8 princes, King Lu was loyal and upright, but he was framed. King Li's mansion was destroyed. Your grandfather was lucky enough to escape from the capital under the protection of a eunuch. After that, he changed his name and grew up in a rural family. That eunuch was King Li's confidant. In order to protect King Li's last bloodline, he didn't reveal your background until he died. However, this information was accidentally leaked in the end. The successive emperors, in order to eliminate the root of the problem, issued secret orders to hunt down your whole family. In the end, only you were left. My father saved you and secretly hid you. A few years later, you served me with the identity of a small guard with Shi Yan and Huemo. In the past 10 years, I gave all my skills to the 4 of you and observed you at the same time. Among the 4 of you, Huemo was kind and ignorant. Shi Yan's personality was unrestrained. Tianwen had more than enough wisdom but not enough temperament. Only you were calm and hardworking. You were the most capable of taking on big responsibilities. Back then, the 4 of you were sent to me together. I wrote down 4 skill books on paper and placed them in front of you for you to choose from. Although you took the last book, I knew that you had never given up on the others. Shi Yan followed Shifu and practiced 1,000 arrows every day. Whenever you had time, you would follow him without saying a word. When you cut your hand with the bow and arrow, the next day you would continue to practice strategy with me without changing your countenance. When Tianwen was learning to read 10 lines at a glance, he was in so much pain that he had to climb the wall all day long to escape. You didn't sleep at night and secretly practiced. Even when Huemo chose to study medicine, you did your best to dabble in it. Jussi, over the years, I have paid attention to your efforts, but I have rarely praised you. But today, I want to tell you that you have indeed lived up to my expectations. Therefore, there's nothing for me to worry about when the Nanping mansion is in your hands in the future. Your Highness, this subordinate is incompetent. Jiu Si raised his head again, his eyes red. No, during the Battle of White Wolf Mountain 3 years ago, everyone said that it was my credit. However, at that time, my poison flared up and I was already an arrow at the end of its flight. If you hadn't sent word to father in time to lead the troops away, I'm afraid I would have perished under the wind and sand. Therefore, Jussi, other than you, no one else can take over my position. You are the heir of the royal family and the best choice for the next heir of the Nanping mansion. Xiahou Qing raised his hand, indicating that this matter had been decided and that there was no need to say anything else. In the boiling medicinal bath, floating mist rose in spirals and shrouded his body. The mist swayed and formed all kinds of illusory images in the air before dissipating into nothingness. He smiled and said in a low voice, "As for Xiao Shu, she is a brave and resourceful woman with a strong heart. She dares to love and hate, surpassing thousands of men in the world. Therefore, one day, when I really return to dust, she will be sad for a while. However, I believe that she will have the courage and ability to walk out and let go. My Xiao Shu deserves the best marriage in the world. Unfortunately, that person is not me." Chapter 522. Outside the window, the rain finally fell. The rain was very heavy, and pomegranate flowers fell to the ground. The dazzling fiery red color was like the tail feathers of a phoenix floating in the water. Like the blood-red plum blossoms on the side of his neck, they appeared particularly warm and dazzling in this turbulent wind and rain. Xiahou Qing listened quietly to the sound of the rain falling outside the window. His 5 fingers gently stroked his eyes, which were only for decoration, and he chuckled to himself. His greatest regret in life was that he didn't know what his Xiao Shu looked like until he died. 100 years later, when he was waiting by the Yellow Spring or the Bridge of Helplessness, what should he do if he missed her? A burst of reckless footsteps suddenly pushed open the door and barged in. "Who is so unruly?" Jiu Si immediately pressed down on his sword. When he saw the person clearly, he released his hand and said in surprise, "Miss Ning." In the bath, Xiahou Qing's hands were as fast as the wind. He hurriedly put the fake skin used to cover the plum blossoms on the side of his neck and grabbed an inner garment to put on. "Miss Ning, my family's Shitzi is bathing. It's really inconvenient to disturb him. Please wait outside for a moment. Shitzi will come out to accompany you after bathing. Please. Miss Ning." Jiu Si tried to stop her, but Ning Shu didn't play by the rules. He couldn't really do anything to her. She protected the things in her hands and ducked under Jiu Si's arm. She ran to the side of the pool and crouched down. She held all the good things hidden in her arms in front of him. Tangerine duck, crystal cake, lotus cake, and ice cream cheese. Good things, all for you. Her voice was as clear and moving as the sound of the rain outside. No matter how cold a heart was, it would melt in such a voice. Jiu Si said awkwardly, "Shitzi, this." Xiahou Qing's thin lips pursed. After a moment of struggle, he finally chose to indulge himself. He raised his hand and said, "You can leave first." The person by the pool bent her knees. Her eyes were red as she carefully held the things she thought were the best in front of him. The person in the pool had her wet hair spread out in the water. Her jade-like face was filled with a gentleness she didn't even notice. Jiu Si looked up at the scene in front of him and was speechless for a long time. He quietly bowed his head and retreated to guard the door. He listened to Ning Shu's slightly panting breaths and said with a smile, "Little Shu, are you worried that I'm hungry, so you came to find me? You look tired. You won't be hungry after eating." Ning Shu nodded vigorously. She was worried that he couldn't see, so she picked up a piece of crystal cake and brought it to his lips, wanting to feed him with her own hands. Xiahou Qing asked, "Has Xiao Shu eaten yet?" Ning Shu shook her head. Not yet. Let's eat together. Xiaoqing chuckled and took the pastry. My little Shu is really a good girl who understands others. If she becomes a wife in the future, she will definitely be a good wife and mother who is careful and gentle. A faint blush appeared on Ning Shu's cheeks. She put down the plate in her arms and leaned towards him with her hands on the edge of the pool. Marry you, she said without hesitation. Her glass-like eyes were full of his reflection, and she couldn't let go of anything else. Only marry you. In the bathtub, Xiaoqing, who was very close to her, was shocked. An uncontrollable heat rose in his chest. His Xiao Shu actually wanted to marry him as his wife. His Xiao Shu was only willing to marry him as his wife. Impulse and greed were like fireworks exploding in his mind. He wanted to immediately hold her hand, to kiss her lips, to pull her into his arms without caring about anything else, to pull her into his bones and blood, to let her accompany him in life and death, to completely merge with her, to never be separated again. What future? What future? What life and death? Why should he care? Why should he care? He, Xiaoqing, was a person of flesh and blood. He had impulse, greed, and desire. Why should he let go? Why couldn't he be selfish? Why couldn't he indulge? Why did he have to be the perfect saint that everyone said? Why did he have to push her into the arms of another man? How could he be willing? How could he be willing? We will not speak within 3 zhang of the carriage. Do you remember this? Jiu Si could not bear it in his heart, but he had no other choice. He could only reply, this subordinate will keep it in mind. Miss Ning, leave with this subordinate. If you insist on not leaving, then I can only ask Miss Hong Fei and the others to escort you out. Go away. Don't touch me. Ning Shu forcefully pushed Jiu Si away and ran towards Xiaoqing. I want you. I only want you. Xiaoqing's lips curved into a cold smile. He retreated step by step, increasing the distance between them. You see, you don't even remember my name. How can you say that you admire me? How can you say that you want me? You and I were originally strangers. We were accidentally connected by an alliance. After you were seriously injured, you were really miserable. I pitied you, pitied you. Now that you have recovered, my pity ends here. Ning Shu's wet face swayed in the wind and rain like the pomegranate flowers outside the window. She did her best to chase after him and reach out to grab him. However, she could only watch as Xiaoqing came ashore from the pool, put on his outer robe, and walked out without any reluctance. He didn't even look back. As Ning Shu staggered, she accidentally kicked over the plate she had brought over from the side of the pool. The fragrant orange duck, the translucent crystal cake, the crispy lotus leaf cake, and the ice cream cheese that she loved the most but couldn't bear to eat all rolled into the medicinal bath. Before they could float, they had already disappeared into the bottom of the pool. It was very similar to her heart. Chapter 524. Early the next morning, the carriage officially set out and left Baijia town. Jiu Si entered the carriage from outside and reported in a low voice, Miss Ning hasn't eaten a single grain of rice or drank a single drop of water since yesterday morning. She's been throwing a tantrum all night. Xiaoqing was draped in a spring and autumn cloak. He clenched his fists and coughed lightly. Compared to yesterday, his complexion was even paler. It was clearly summer, but he felt as if he had turned himself into a block of ice. Over the past few days in Baijia town, she has gradually stopped rejecting other people. Now that she's suddenly leaving me, it's a bit hard for her to accept. After a while, she'll get better. Josie lowered his eyes and softly replied, yes. After coughing for a while, Xiaoqing took a sip of the tea Josie handed him. He said, you think I've done something wrong, don't you? Josie considered it for a long time. In the end, he couldn't help but say, this subordinate doesn't think the heir has done something wrong. I just think that Miss Ning hasn't fully recovered yet. Her temperament and mind are slowly recovering. Right now, the only person in this world that she can completely rely on is you, the heir. You've suddenly drawn a clear line with her. It seems a bit too cruel for her, so it's understandable that she can't accept it right now. If you take things slowly and subtly pull away from her bit by bit, perhaps Miss Ning will find it easier to accept. No, you don't understand her. With her personality, if she's close, she'll be close. If she's far, she'll be far away. If there's no one in her heart, she won't drag things out. If she admires someone, she'll even put her life down. Even if she hasn't fully recovered from the damage to her mind, the principles and propriety in her bones haven't changed. Dragging things out won't have any effect on her. On the contrary, it'll make her even more unwilling to leave me. If I wait until the day she fully recovers, I'm afraid So, it has to be now. He didn't know when his heart had been moved. Perhaps it was when she was fearless in the face of 100,000 people at the Phoenix Terrace. Perhaps it was when he had pushed her into the secret passage without saying a word during the explosion in the western suburbs. After she had recovered from her shock and anger, she had flatteringly said to him, "Thank you, Your Highness, for saving my life. I will never forget it." Perhaps it was that cold spring morning when he had met such a thick-skinned woman for the first time in his life, who had rashly barged into the prince's residence and shamelessly wanted to form an alliance with him. Or perhaps it was under the cold moon, under the lonely parasol tree in the ancestral tomb of the Qi family, when he had almost broken her neck, she had boldly taken the opportunity to steal the jade pendant from his waist. It must have been at a time when even he hadn't noticed that he had instinctively ordered Tianwen to watch her every move in order to prevent her from betraying the alliance. In fact, he didn't know the specific reason. Thus, he knew that the Yun family's young master had met her at the Plum Mountain. He knew that the sixth prince, Xiao Yuni, was her childhood sweetheart and had been pestering her. He knew that after the cloud leaf poison was cured, she had drawn a clear line between them and no longer had anything to do with him. He also knew that Xiao Yuni had forced her to see him many times and threatened her with their old relationship, but she still kept a respectful distance from him and had never been too indecisive. How could such a person like her tolerate indecisiveness when she was so clear-cut? Thus, no matter how unwilling he was, how unbearable it was, and how painful it was, he had to completely push her away. There was no other way. In this way, when everything returned to normal in the future, perhaps her resentment towards him would lessen. Jussi finally understood and knelt on one knee. "This subordinate is stupid and didn't understand Your Highness's deep meaning. Please punish me." Xiaoqing coughed again and frowned. He helped him up. "I said that you are the next successor of the Nanping Prince's estate that I have chosen. You don't have to be a servant anymore." Jussi had already made a decision in his heart. "No, Your Highness is Your Highness and my benefactor. This subordinate didn't sleep last night. Jussi is grateful for Your Highness's favor and kindness, but this subordinate has already made a decision. Jussi will be Your Highness's servant for the rest of my life. The only successor of the Nanping Prince's estate will always be Your Highness. When we return to the capital this time, this subordinate will protect Your Highness's life even if my body is smashed to pieces. You will definitely live on and live peacefully until you are 100 years old. At that time, His Highness would no longer have to be separated from his beloved woman and would no longer be in such pain." Jussi. For the first time, Jussi ignored his order. "Your Highness, Miss Ning hasn't eaten yet. Please allow this subordinate to leave first and prepare some other fresh food to persuade her. Left alone in the carriage, Xiaoqing stretched out his hand but didn't catch anything. He couldn't help but laugh involuntarily. He really didn't misjudge Juicy. However, even his most loyal subordinate had learned to rebel. What should he do? Yesterday it was raining heavily, and today it was sunny again. The weather was a bit stuffy, but there were no clouds for thousands of miles. The journey to the human world wasn't in vain. Chapter 525. Because he was worried that Ning Shu had not recovered and Xiaoqing was poisoned, he stopped and walked for 3 days on the way back to the capital. On the first day, Ning Shu did not eat or drink. He did not ask her anything and seemed to have completely forgotten about her. On the second day, Shi Yan hunted a rabbit to roast. She pouted and squatted beside him stubbornly. He turned a deaf ear to her and took the rabbit leg that Shi Yan cut and enjoyed it as if no one was around. Ning Shu looked at him longingly, hoping that he would say a few words to her and persuade her so that she would eat all the rabbit meat in front of her. However, he only slowly wiped his hands after he finished eating and got back into the carriage. On the third day, Ning Shu finally lost her mind due to hunger. She swallowed a mouthful of porridge silently with red eyes. Xiaoqing finally appeared and said coldly, "Very good." Ning Shu wept bitterly and drank the entire bowl of porridge without saying a word. It was as if she had withered away. Xiao Zhangping quietly pushed Mo. "Hey, what's wrong with your Shitzi and Ning Shu? Did they break up?" These two people were like the same person before. They ate and rested, and Ning Shu refused to leave Xiaoqing. As long as Ning Shu made a request, Xiaoqing would not refuse. It was just like how King Zhou treated Daji, Zhou Yu treated Bao Si, and Sima Xiangru treated Zhuo Wenjun in the novel. She was jealous of them. But now, it has only been a few days and everything has changed. Xiao Zhangping was curious for 3 days and finally could not help but ask Mo for gossip. Mo also did not know the inside story. He was as anxious as an ant in a hot pot. He asked his Shitzi several times openly and secretly, but he was always sent away as soon as he opened his mouth. He then went to ask Jiu Si. Jiu Si's mouth was like a sawed-off gourd and he could not get a word out. Could it be that the two of them had a conflict? That didn't seem to be the case. His young master was the most cultured. Moreover, Lady Ning was clear and transparent right now. She only had his young master in her eyes, so there shouldn't be any conflicts. Or perhaps, his Shitzi had given up on Lady Ning. If it was so easy for his heart to turn cold, a few days ago, his young master would not have endured the pain of the poison acting up and braved the rain to save someone. Could it be, looking at Xiao Zhangping's expectant eyes, Mo felt sour in his heart. He straightened his neck and said, "My Shitzi and Lady Ning have the same mind. How can they break up? If Princess has the time to mind my master's business, why don't you think about how to deal with His Majesty and the Empress when you enter the capital later?" Mo always has a soft temper. But this time, he just turns around and leaves without saying goodbye. Xiao Zhangping is completely confused. How dare you? Hong Fei, look, there are no good men. He dares to be rude to me. He knows that I won't have a good ending when I return to the palace, but he doesn't come to give me any advice. He even laughs at me. It seems that he was just pretending to be obedient to me before. He's just flattering me. I'm so angry. I'm so angry. The master of this Nanping mansion is a bastard, and so are the guards. Hong Fei, get on the carriage with me. After I return to the palace, if I talk to anyone in the Nanping mansion again, my name is not Xiao Zhangping. Looking at Xiao Zhangping, who was flustered and exasperated, Hong Fei silently followed and served her. She also took a fan and fanned for her to cool down. What she doesn't dare to say in her heart is, "My princess, you have been infatuated with Xiahou Shizhi for so many years. Can't you see this clearly? That little guard clearly misunderstands that you still care about Xiahou Shizhi and hope that they will separate so that you can take advantage of the situation. So he is jealous. Also, you have never taken a little guard seriously before. Now you are scolding him together with your master's guard. You clearly take it to heart, but you just don't realize it." Hong Fei was carefully selected by old Princess Yu and arranged to serve Xiao Zhangping for many years. She naturally knows Xiao Zhangping's character like the back of her hand. However, even if she understands it, she won't say it out loud. Because a little guard of the mansion, without rank, no family background, and no parents, what future does a princess of the same country have? No. So just let it be there. Chapter 526. 3 days were neither too long nor too short, and they passed by very quickly. Shi Yan, who was leading the way, reined in his horse and shouted, "Stop," before stopping at the city gate. Sure enough, it was different from the past. The city gate was heavily guarded, and there were twice as many guards as before. It was enough to show how tense the situation in the city was. They planned to hide their tracks and quietly return to the capital, so they deliberately divided into 2 groups. Shi Yan guarded Xiahou Qing and Ning Shu in the front, and Hui Mo guarded Xiao Zhangping in the back. Unexpectedly, someone recognized them as soon as they appeared at the city gate. Look, isn't that the heir of Xiahou's carriage? Although it's not as luxurious as the carriage of the prince's mansion, the guards on both sides are majestic. It can't be anyone other than the guards of the Prince of Nanping. I think so too. The rumors are right. Heir Xiahou has returned to the capital. The one sitting in the carriage behind must be Duke Ning's famous eldest daughter, Ning Shu. Come and see. Come and see. The people at the city gate quickly gathered. Some of them were not in a hurry to leave the city and stood aside to watch the show. In the carriage, Xiahou Qing secretly frowned and rubbed his fingers back and forth. In the crowd, Tan Siwei, who did not have time to take off his official robe, squeezed out as a spectator. He greeted the guards at the city gate and personally went to the front of the carriage to welcome them. Heir Xiahou, you've had a hard journey. I specially came to welcome you. Xiahou Qing ordered Zhou Si to lift the curtain and welcome Tan Siwei into the carriage. He was too lazy to be mysterious. He directly hung the token of the Prince of Nanping and drove the carriage into the city. Like a spark falling into dry grass, the news of Ning Shu, the eldest daughter of the Ning family, came back from the dead, and Xiahou Qing, the heir of the Prince of Nanping, suddenly returned to the capital, spread through the streets and alleys. In the crowd, Tianwen silently pulled down the straw hat on his head and walked into the deep alley with a load on his shoulder. In the carriage, Xiahou Qing and Tan Siwei sat opposite each other. Xiahou Qing nodded slightly. Thank you for waiting, Xiao Qing Tan. However, in just a few days, Tan Siwei, who once had a baby face, lost his childishness in a very short period of time after leaving the guidance and protection of his father and brother. His chin slowly sharpened, his personality became more mature, and his eyes became more steady and resolute. However, there was one thing that did not change, and that was the determination in his bones that he would rather die than live in dishonor. Oh no, Tan Siwei hurriedly corrected himself. Miss Shu was in danger that day, and I was so incompetent that I didn't know about it at all. Chapter 527. With the appearance of the 4th plum blossom petal, Xiahou Qing's poison acted up more and more frequently. He clearly felt as if there were ants and insects in his organs eating his flesh piece by piece, making him unable to sleep at night. At the same time, he also clearly felt that the hearing he had painstakingly cultivated after losing his sight was gradually being eaten away. He knew that there was not much time left for him. In the near future, maybe half a year, maybe 3 months, or maybe only 30 to 50 days, he would have to bid farewell to the world in the most embarrassing manner in the world. Incense was burning in the carriage and the smoke curled into blurred shapes in the air. Behind the white smoke, Xiahou Qing's porcelain-like face was expressionless. He said lightly, "Nothing. I just want to ask if Tan Xiaoqing still wants to marry Xiao Shu." Tan Siwei was even more confused. If he had not heard Xiahou Qing say this with his own ears, he would have thought that he was dreaming. Although he did not understand, he saw that Xiahou Qing's expression was very serious and did not seem to be joking. So he lowered his eyes and shook his head. "Of course I think about it day and night and look forward to it, but," Xiahou Qing immediately interrupted him. "No buts. Let me ask you again. If Xiao Shu is in danger again, are you willing to do your best to protect her?" "Of course I am willing. But my ability is not as good as yours. I am afraid that I will not be able to do it like this time. I only want to ask you, to the best of your ability, can you treat her like your own life, like your own eyes, and be willing to stand in front of her, block all dangers for her, and ensure that she can live out her life safely and smoothly?" Tan Siwei looked at him in astonishment. Looking at his bloodless face wrapped in the cloak, some kind of speculation suddenly surged in his heart. He subconsciously pressed on the small table and half stood up in surprise. "Xiahou Shizi, could it be that you?" Xiahou Qing suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were as bright as stars, but he couldn't see anything clearly. It was as if a ball of fire was burning directly into Tan Siwei's heart. "Everything else has nothing to do with you. I'm only giving you this one chance. If you have any hesitation in your heart, then let's forget about this matter. In the future, you and Xiahou Qing will go your separate ways." The fire in Tan Siwei's heart seemed to have been ignited by his gaze. His limbs and bones were filled with warmth. His heart was still filled with endless confusion, but a hidden desire overwhelmed everything else. This might be his only chance, and also his last chance to get Shu. If he missed it, it would be too late for regrets. This fervent desire caused him to grip the chopping board with all his might without even thinking. Chapter 528. Since their whereabouts had been exposed, there was no need to hide anymore. Xiahou Qing ordered everyone to change back into the bodyguard uniform of the Wang mansion and returned to the Wang mansion. Hui Mo led another group of people to escort Xiao Zhangping back to the palace. Ning Shu had been tormented for 3 days. She was exhausted and fell asleep in the carriage. Zigui was still injured and couldn't carry her out. So he looked at Xiahou Qing for help and pulled Shi Yan to speak for her. "Shizi, Lady Ning is asleep. We are afraid of offending her. Why don't you?" She didn't expect Xiahou Qing to ignore her. With Jussi's support, he got off the carriage and turned to walk into the manor. He said coldly, "Go summon Fang Mama. If one maidservant can't carry her, then 2 or 3. There's always a way to carry her inside. If she really can't be carried, then wake her up and go back to sleep. I have something important to do. If you don't inform me, don't disturb me." After he said that, he really didn't care anymore. He turned and disappeared behind the wall without a trace of nostalgia. Not long after, Fang Mama stood in front of the carriage with a group of maids and began to do business. Zigui only hated that his tongue was broken and he couldn't speak. He was so angry that he stepped on Shi Yan's foot. "Ow!" Shi Yan cried out, but since his master was in the wrong, his subordinate was implicated. No matter how wronged he felt, he had no choice but to shed a tear of sympathy for himself. When the tear was full, he swallowed it back down, and let his last cry of grief. Tianwen was already waiting in the hall. When he saw Xiaoqing, he bent down and helped him to sit down. Then he closed the door. Shitzi, yesterday evening, the news of you and Lady Ning returning to the capital began to spread in the city. We couldn't stop it. I couldn't find the source who deliberately spread the news. I think that when we were secretly searching for the news of that person's eyes were always on us. She may have had two purposes in doing so: one, to let us know that she knew where we were, and that she had everything under her control; the other, to announce that she was ready to strike this time. I think that Shitzi's return to the capital will not be peaceful. Perhaps this is not the best time. He had not returned for several days, unaware that the little orioles on the bird perch outside the hall had finally returned. One by one, the tender yellow balls scrambled to get into the window lattice and landed on his shoulder and the back of his hand. Xiaoqing picked up the one that loved to act spoiled the most. He gently placed it in the palm of his hand and felt the warm vitality of this little creature. She has been hiding for many years and has finally shown herself. Furthermore, she has turned the capital upside down. Now that she is about to reveal her trump card, the conspiracy that has been surrounding me all these years will also surface. If this is not the best time, then there is no other time. So, I not only come back, but also meet that person. How is the situation in the palace now? 3 days ago, His Majesty vomited blood and fainted. All the imperial physicians went to the palace to attend to him, but none of them returned. There are rumors that His Majesty is in danger. 4th Prince Xiao Yunsu brought people to break into the palace but failed. The officials were also stopped outside the hall by Empress Chao for fear of disturbing the emperor's rest. Now, other than Empress Chao, no one else can enter to visit. The court and the harem are talking about it. As for the 3 children in the city, they are still missing. A severed finger fell from the sky in the imperial mausoleum of the late emperor. Minister Tan Xiaoqing brought people to take a look. It belongs to a... Heaven's Inquisition wanted to say something but hesitated. Chapter 529. After Tianwen finished his report, Xiaoqing fell into deep thought for a long time. The door creaked open and Fong Mama bowed as she came in. "Your Highness, Miss Ning has been settled." Hearing her name, Xiaoqing's fingertips moved, causing the little bird that was rubbing against his palm to suspiciously tilt its little head. Then he heard its master use a restrained voice to say, "When she got off the carriage, did she cry?" When this old servant brought the maidservants to get her off the carriage, the first thing she asked when she woke up was where Your Highness was. After this old servant told her the truth, her face showed disappointment, but she didn't cry. She just made a sound and then followed this old servant into the side hall to bathe and change her clothes. "That's good." Xiaoqing's expression was distant, as if they were separated by thousands of miles of clouds. He gave a low laugh. "In this world, there is no one who can't live without someone. Ning Shu is not unable to live without Xiaoqing. After experiencing so much disappointment, she will become numb. In the future, she will become more and more used to living without me. This is very good, very good." After he finished speaking, Xiaoqing suddenly lowered his neck and coughed twice. Fong Mama quickly took a handkerchief to serve him, but when she saw the dazzling red color on the snow-white handkerchief, she was shocked. Even the little bird was scared away by the dazzling sweet smell. Fong Mama said, "Your Highness." Xiaoqing was used to it and didn't take it to heart. "It's no big deal. Go tell the small kitchen to prepare a few dishes that she likes to eat and send them over. She has been throwing tantrums for the past few days and hasn't had a good meal. She should be able to eat today." You guys watch from the side and don't let her eat too much. Her stomach can't take it. That's right, add 2 more dishes that don't suit her taste and send them over. Don't let her think too much. Don't forget to boil the medicine she drinks on time and send it over. In short, Fong Mama, I'll leave her to you. Fong Mama had watched him grow up. For a moment, her heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. She couldn't hide her grief. Your Highness, what are you saying? This is this old servant's duty. But why does your Highness want to do this? Although the poison is overbearing, it's not impossible to cure it. Didn't they hear that the young master of Imperial Censor Yun had come back to life a few days ago? Now, he's studying and cultivating in his hometown. Your Highness, you will definitely get better. Xiahou Qing was non-committal. He changed the topic and asked, have you ever fished before? Fong Mama didn't understand what she meant. She turned around and wiped her tears. I've fished once or twice. Xiahou Qing nodded. Anyone who has fished before knows that if you want a fish to take the bait, you have to prepare the freshest fish worms and then release the long line. After a long and patient wait, you can catch the big fish in your mind. This seemed simple, but in reality, it was extremely difficult. Sometimes, if one was unlucky, they might waste an entire day and still not gain anything. People who didn't know how to fish often couldn't see these. They only saw the delicious live fish in the fisherman's urn. They were envious, so they also learned to fish. To me, the fact that the cloud leaf's poison has been cured is like the fish that someone else caught. It was also the only light in the dark night, leading me to chase after it with hope. But in reality, I had already become the fish that someone else put out the bait to catch, and I didn't know. Now that I know, I won't let that person play with me anymore. Perhaps there was another antidote in this world that could cure the kiss of the plum blossom, but she had carefully planned it for 11 years, so she wouldn't easily hand it over. Rather than being grabbed by the throat and becoming someone else's captive, it would be better for me to break it myself. Therefore, there is no need to think about the antidote. Before I die, my only wish is to solve all the mysteries. Cough, cough. Fong Mama, you watched me grow up, so you know me. There is no need to persuade me. Fong Mama was helpless against his stubbornness. She knew that if she forced him to put down his dignity, it would be a punishment worse than death. She could only quietly shed a few more tears. She turned around and went out to take care of Ning Shu. As soon as she opened the door, she heard a commotion outside. She frowned and said, "What's going on? Don't you know that His Highness is resting in the hall?" The one who came to report was a guard. His face was full of panic as he loudly reported, "It's people from the palace. They came to pass on the Empress' imperial decree to immediately summon Duke Ning Shu into the palace. If there is any delay, the punishment will be increased." This subordinate told them that Lady Ning was injured. As a result, the eunuch said, "There is no excuse. Even if she is injured or dead, she must be carried into the palace to see Feng Yan." Chapter 530. Xiahou Qing, the heir of Prince Nanping, greets the Empress. The cold candles in the Phoenix Algae Palace flickered, and her gaze was like a blade. Empress Chao sat upright on the phoenix chair, her hand supporting her forehead. She looked with a faint smile at Xiahou Qing, who had come uninvited, and Ning Shu, who was behind him, wearing a cloak, who was nervously restraining herself. After pondering for a long time, she said slowly, "I remember that I only invited the Ning family's girl into the palace to chat with me. Why is heir Xiahou also interested in coming? Could it be that after not seeing each other for a few days, you remembered to pay your respects to me? That's really considerate of you." Xiahou Qing also smiled and said, "Your Majesty is the mother of the world and in charge of all matters in the palace. Recently, you have worked hard to take care of His Majesty's body. Your Majesty is for the country and the people. I am unable to relieve Your Majesty's worries because of my disability. In addition, Your Majesty has been working hard recently and I'm afraid that your mind is restless. Your Majesty has been ill for a long time. I specially offer you 100-year-old ginseng. I hope Your Majesty will kindly accept it. The Empress seemed to be in a good mood and joked with him, "You are indeed a considerate and polite child. I still remember when you were brought into the palace by the old prince for the first time. I saw that you were extraordinary. Whether it was your appearance, character, or intelligence, you are outstanding among the younger generation of the royal family. What's even more rare is that you are modest and not arrogant at such a young age. You know when to advance and retreat, you are steady and generous, and you can keep your composure. I only hate that my body was damaged after giving birth to the first prince and I can no longer have children. Otherwise, if you were born in my womb, it would be my great fortune. What a pity, what a pity. Now that you have paid your respects, I will accept this ginseng. Thank you for your trouble. I still have some personal things to say to the Ning family's girl. It is inconvenient for others to be present. Heir of Prince Xiaoho, please go first. Kai Bin, send the heir out for me. Kai Bin immediately stepped forward, Your Highness, this way please. Xiaoho Qing stopped smiling and pursed his thin lips. He didn't move. The coldness in Empress Chow's eyes became even sharper as she curled her lips with interest. Kai Bin still had a lingering fear and reminded him again, Prince Xiaoho, it's late. You're a man and it's not appropriate for you to stay in the harem for too long. Please leave. Xiaoho Qing remained motionless. On the jade steps, she looked at him with a smile. He stood in front of Ning Shu, as steady as Mount Tai. Neither of them spoke, as if they were in a silent confrontation. On this hot summer day, Kai Bao's back was drenched in cold sweat. In fact, this kind of unimaginable strange thing, although it sounds mysterious, can cause people to be lost in fanciful thoughts. To the majority of the people, as long as it doesn't affect their lives, it's just another topic to talk about after a meal. After passing it on, there will be a day when it stops. Nyang Nyang has many capable people at her side, so she naturally has a way to deal with this. But what no one expected was that 3 children were lost in the capital, instantly touching the pain of the people's skin. This made this matter turn from a strange story into a huge mess. Although Qing's eyes were busy, she could see that although the capital looked like it was under control and no one was rioting, the inside was already a mess. The officials were disloyal, the people were boiling, and the princes were restless. A great change in the country could happen at any time. It could happen sooner or later, but it was unavoidable. No one knows better than you that if this case continues to happen, the grievances of one person will become the grievances of 100, 1,000, 10,000 people. When that time comes, even if Nyang Nyang has the ability of a martial emperor, it will be difficult to reverse the situation. If you want to control the situation as quickly as possible, there is only one way: solve the case of the missing children and use the grievances of the people to clear Nyang Nyang's name. And the only person who can help Nyang Nyang is Ning Shu, there is no one else. Chapter 532. Chao Ho had always known that Xiaoho Qing was extremely intelligent, but when all her thoughts were exposed, she still couldn't help but feel a little scared. In an instant, a hidden killing intent rose from the bottom of her heart. If such a person was allowed to exist in this world, if he went against her in the future, it would be a great disaster. It was better to get rid of him as soon as possible and get rid of all future troubles. However, this killing intent only flashed for a moment and was quickly suppressed by her because she knew that this was not the best time. So she stopped and a cold laugh came from the bottom of her throat. She casually took a phoenix hairpin from her complicated hair bun and played with it in her hand. Xia Ho Shizi, even if you are right, so what? That's exactly what I'm planning to do. Don't tell me you're going to stop me. In order to save themselves, the Ning family dared to extend their hands to me, causing the current situation. So what if I kill the entire Duke's manor? If Ning Shu is obedient and plays this show with me to solve the case of the missing children, maybe I can leave her mother's body intact. If she is not willing, then let her hold her 5-year-old brother's body and die with him. As expected, the Empress didn't plan to let Ning Shu walk out of this palace door in one piece from the beginning. Xiahou Qing's face tightened, and he spoke faster. It was like a jade hammer striking against a bell, and his voice was deafening. Have you ever thought that this case wasn't done by the Ning family? Instead, it's a trap that's been painstakingly planned to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. Using one person's life and the safety of 3 children to plot against 4 forces. Even if the Ning clan really had the guts to do this, by choosing to frame the imperial concubine, not only would they not be able to resolve their current situation, they would instead add another enemy that the Ning clan could not contend against. Even the stupidest person in the world would not choose to do such a suicidal thing. So, Your Highness, you have fallen into a trap. The person who framed you wasn't the Ning family, but your common enemy. As Xiahou Qing spoke, he judged Qiao Ho's reaction. From her sudden stop in her breathing, he could tell that she had clearly heard his words. He then continued, that person is like a spider weaving a web in a cave, silently pulling all of you into his monstrous web. In this series of big cases, King Ku, Princess Royal, the Ning family, and the Empress, the mother of the world, none of them benefited. They were all losers. In the end, they made you suspect each other. A book in the belly of a fish killed Princess Royal's only bloodline, and put Princess He Exayan in prison. Then they used your hand to crush the Ning family, and then used the world's hand to crush you. All of this was linked, like the sandpiper and the clam fighting, and only the fisherman would benefit. Nyang Nyang, I implore you to reconsider. You must not fall into that person's evil scheme. When Xiahou Qing finished speaking, the phoenix hairpin in Qiao Ho's hand dropped and fell to the ground with a bang. The palace servants hurriedly bent over to pick it up. Then, they heard Empress Qiao, who had always been graceful and powerful, reveal a voice that bordered on fear for the first time. How is this possible? She's already dead. She suddenly raised her head and took another step forward. She glared at Xiahou Qing with a gaze that was as sharp as needles. Gritting her teeth, she said, Xiahou Qing, don't think that just because you have a glib tongue, this empress will believe you. If you want to say that we have a common enemy, then there is only one person. However, that person has long been turned into a pile of charcoal. Even the immortals can't save her. This empress and His Majesty personally went to examine her corpse. There is no possibility of it being stolen. Chapter 533. Empress Qiao's momentary loss of self-control was like a ray of light leaking from a dark cloud in the sky. It had just appeared when it was hurriedly covered. She stopped talking and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the fear and trepidation had been completely suppressed. She turned and walked back to the splendid phoenix chair without saying a word. However, someone as sharp as Xiahou Qing still caught the tail of the light. He didn't make a sound and didn't release it. The hall fell into a short silence until a lamp silently burned out. The flame flickered and the palace maids immediately came forward to add candles. Empress Qiao finally looked up and waved at the palace maids. Are you all blind? Xiahou Shizi has been in the palace for a long time. Why hasn't the tea been served? Xiahou Shizi, you don't look well. Have you been feeling unwell recently? Your health has not been good since you were young. You have made me very worried. Come, quickly give me a seat. The tense atmosphere dissipated in an instant. Xiaoqing also smiled and bowed. Thank you, Your Highness, for your concern. It's not serious. That's good. Empress Chao nodded in relief. She also took a cup of tea from a palace maid. She lifted the lid and gently slid the tea over the rim of the cup. She didn't drink it. Instead, she sighed and said, I won't hide it from Shitzi. Since the beginning of this case, this empress has suffered a disaster from the heavens for no reason. This empress has been worried and uneasy. I didn't expect that even His Majesty was so angry that he became seriously ill. It seems that I have the upper hand at the moment. In fact, the undercurrent in the palace has been turbulent and greedy, ready to swallow me alive at any time. As far as the eye can see, there is no one to help me. Only Xiahou Shitzi is willing to help me. I am deeply moved. Then, in your opinion, what can I do to break out of my current predicament? Solve the case, Xiaoqing said straightforwardly. Empress Chao put down her teacup and rubbed her temples. She sighed and said, Shitzi's words are easy to say. Since the case was launched, all the soldiers in the city were mobilized and almost turned the entire capital upside down. However, after nearly 10 days, there was no result. On the contrary, the rumors in the marketplace became even more rampant. Empress Chao's eyes fell on Ning Shu, who had been wearing a cloak and keeping her head lowered. I thought I could count on this girl. She has made great contributions to His Majesty in the previous cases, and I have a whole new level of respect for her. But now, her tone was light and sarcastic, as if she was looking at a bird with broken wings. No matter how brave and good a horse is, if its legs are crippled, it will still have the strength to fight. I seem to have heard that this girl is not as good as she used to be. Her words were sharp. Obviously, she had already received news that Ning Shu's mind was damaged. And Ning Shu obviously couldn't gain her trust. I can. Just as Empress Chao finished speaking, Ning Shu, who had been standing in silence and looking around blankly, suddenly raised her head. The hat covering her head slipped off. Her voice was as soft as jade, but it was powerful and resonant. It was like a cluster of slender orchids that would never break. Empress Chao looked at her with some surprise. She narrowed her eyes and looked up and down suspiciously. You can really? I can. Ning Shu repeated. She fearlessly met her knife-like gaze. Empress Chao smiled. She suddenly stood up. The peonies embroidered with gold thread on her body were impudently and overbearingly piercing into Ning Shu's eyes under the candlelight. Good. Ning Shu, listen well. This is a trap. They are plotting against your Ning family, plotting against me, and plotting against the entire imperial court, and even the Great Yu's 9 provinces and 16 prefectures. In at most 10 days, I want you to investigate this case for me as soon as possible. If you can help me smoothly pass this tribulation, I will not only guarantee your mother's safety, but I will also guarantee your entire family's safety. I will also guarantee that you will have a smooth career and will never have to worry about anything. Otherwise, I will have no choice but to bear the pain and let your entire Ning family be loyal to me. Chapter 534. The heavy vermilion gate of the Phoenix Algae Palace opened and closed. It had only been an hour, but it seemed to have been half a lifetime. Jiu Si helped Xiaoqing out of the high threshold. His back was already soaked in cold sweat. When they were finally far away from the richly ornamented but seemingly man-eating palace, Jiu Si whispered, "Young master," who was the person the Empress was referring to just now. The summer night was full of stars, and the sky was full of stars. Xiaoqing walked down the steps with Jiu Si's help. Behind him, the hundreds of millions of fireflies seemed to be chasing him. His skin was so pale that it seemed like it would disperse at any time under the starlight. She has been dead for many years. A piece of charcoal, worthy of the Emperor and the Empress's personal inspection. Many years later, when I think of her name, Empress Chao will be frightened. There is only one such person in 25 years. He raised his fingertips and gently wrote a word on Jiu Si's elbow. Zhou. Jiu Si almost cried out in surprise. His heart was in turmoil. He lowered his voice and said, "But that person has long ascended to immortality. Even if she had the ability to steal from heaven, she was lucky enough to survive. Now that many years have passed, she has long become an old and decrepit person. The person who confronted us in the rainy night obviously doesn't match. Perhaps it was a descendant of the Zhou family." In the past 20 years, the court had never stopped strangling the descendants of the Zhou family. The century-old giant family disappeared overnight. Even if there were a few broken branches and withered leaves, they could only hide in the deep mountains and old forests and beg for food in the shabby alleys. That was why there was the case of Zhou Yuzhao sneaking into the palace and pretending to be concubine Yuan. So it didn't make sense. Xiahou Qing stretched out his palm and motioned for Jiu Si to hand over the bamboo stick. If I am right, the other party has been planning for many years. The last move is finally about to be made. At that time, whether it is a human or a ghost, we will know at a glance. What we need to do is to be patient. Jiu Si clasped his hands and bowed. Yes. He blindly followed behind and watched as his Shiziyi tapped his bamboo cane lightly, testing the road ahead step by step. He turned around and looked at Ning Shu, who had been walking quietly behind him. After following him for a long time, she bit her lower lip and finally mustered up her courage. She lifted her skirt and ran over, running behind the crown prince. Jiu slowed down his pace and kept a distance between them while looking around. On the long palace road, Ning Shu obediently stepped on his shadow, walking step by step. The 2 rows of fairy palace lanterns by the roadside emitted a warm orange light, sticking their shadows together and then separated, and then stuck together again. Every time they were together, Ning Shu would be secretly happy, but every time they were apart, she would be depressed. If it was before, she would not have any misgivings. If she wanted to throw herself at him and talk to him, she would. But after these few days of indifference, she suddenly felt timid. She was like a little rabbit that had been doted on by its master but was suddenly thrown to the side. Her heart was filled with endless loneliness. After being followed for a long time and becoming impatient, Xiahou Qing finally stopped and spoke first. "What is it?" Ning Shu wasn't paying attention and almost bumped into his back. Xiahou Qing's fingers moved, but in the end, he didn't reach out. He squeezed it tightly into his sleeve and didn't say a word as he waited for her to respond. Ning Shu finally steadied herself after being flustered for a while. She looked at him expectantly. "Just now, thank you for protecting me." Even though her mind was still a mess, she still had her reason. She could see that just now in the hall, when the Empress wanted to kill her, he had protected her. Xiahou Qing turned his head and calmly said, "I said before that we are allies and we use each other. If you were hurt, it would not be a good thing for me. So, helping you is helping myself. There is no need to be polite." His simple words caused the light in Ning Shu's eyes to dim. Chapter 535. Ning Shu became anxious and tried hard to recall. But just now Xiahou Qing let out a chuckle, as if laughing at her own wishful thinking. "You want to say that I almost fell out with the Empress for you? You think too much." It's true that I did have the intention to protect you for the sake of our alliance, but it was more to deliberately provoke the Empress and find out some unknown secrets from her mouth. At the same time, I used her hand for us to gather all the power possible to find out the enemy who plotted against me. As for you, it's just a favor. Don't think too much. You should know that I'm the king of Southern Peace. I've enjoyed extraordinary glory and splendor since the founding of the country. Later, in order to avoid the wind, I asked for a demotion and guarded Yunyan State alone. However, no one can shake the unparalleled glory of our king's mansion. As the only heir of the king of Southern Peace, I should marry someone in the future. Even if it's not a princess, it should at least be a princess. Lady Ning, please no. Ning Shu was stunned for a moment. She wanted to put on a smiling face, but she couldn't for a long time. She could only nod and shake her head stupidly. Ah. Oh, okay, I know. Xiahou Qing's palms trembled violently in his sleeves. He raised his head and inhaled a mouthful of hot air. How do you feel now? Ning Shu said gloomily, I'm quite good. Xiahou Qing said, in that case, you should return to the Duke's mansion. Being closer to your family will help you recover your memory sooner. If you encounter something I can help with during the investigation, send someone to inform me. After all, we're an alliance that benefits each other. Jissi, we should have reached the palace gate in front, right? Jissi stepped forward and followed. Yes, there's still more than 10 feet. Xiahou Qing coughed softly and said in a businesslike manner, we came in 2 carriages. I don't feel well. Accompany me back to the mansion first. Leave 2 people to send Lady Ning off. Her personal bodyguard should also be sent back to the House of Duke later. There are too many eyes in the imperial residence. Jiu Si glanced at Ning Shu's expression. The light in his eyes swirled like a pool of water, but in the end, he couldn't say anything. He bowed and answered, yes. He helped Xiahou Qing out of the palace and into the carriage. The carriage carried Xiahou Qing away leisurely without the slightest bit of reluctance, leaving Ning Shu alone behind in the Vermilion Palace gate. Ning Shu subconsciously took a step forward, but she forced herself to stop. Her long eyelashes fluttered as she hugged herself and squatted on the ground. In the carriage, Xiahou Qing clenched his fists, forcing himself not to be soft-hearted and not to hesitate. That was why he didn't order the carriage to stop. The edge of the finger bone in his palm pierced deeply into his flesh. He used the pain to help him keep his mind clear. He leaned against the carriage and said hoarsely, leave 2/3 of the men behind to protect her. If there's even the slightest movement, immediately report to me. Jiu Si withdrew his gaze and said in a low voice, 2/3. Isn't that too much? Right now, Lord Murong has also fallen into a trap. Someone can harm you at any time. With just a few subordinates, we cannot guarantee your safety. Lord Murong's heart is tied to Miss Ning, this subordinate can understand, but you completely disregard your own safety, forgive this subordinate for not being able to agree. My safety. Xiahou Qing said self-deprecatingly. Jiu Si, you're thinking too much. The 4th plum blossom petal on my neck didn't come earlier or later. It just had to appear now. This is already the biggest threat to me. In this world, other than it, what else can hurt me? Therefore, even if I set up an impenetrable defense around me, when it's time to die, no one can stop me. It's a waste to leave these men by my side. However, if they stay by her side, when I feel at ease, I might be able to live a day or 2 longer. Jiu Si, do you also want to disobey me? Heir apparent. Jiu Si lowered his head and struggled, but in the end, he couldn't dissuade him. He summoned the head of the imperial bodyguards and ordered them to hide their tracks and protect Ning Shu. After the arrangements were completed, Xiahou Qing finally leaned against the cushion in exhaustion. His voice was hoarse as he asked, "Did she cry just now?" Josie was silent for a moment before saying, "It seems like she cried." Xiaoqing rolled up his sleeves and coughed heavily, coughing up a mouthful of blood. Josie hurriedly went to follow his heart. Xiaoqing brushed his sleeves carelessly and looked at a place behind him that he couldn't see for a long time. He stared until the moon was cold and the stars were sparse. Only then did he mock and hurt himself. She's not someone who likes to cry. She's usually not afraid of anything and is braver than a tiger in the mountains. I didn't expect that the person who made her cry in the end would be me. Chapter 536. Inside the palace, on the high platform behind Ningxu, a man in a scarlet cloak looked at her curled-up figure. The veins on the back of his clenched fists popped out. He could no longer suppress himself and slammed the railing, turning to go down the steps. A masked woman wearing a guard's armor suddenly appeared and reached out to stop him. "Your Highness, you can't go over. Could it be that you've forgotten what Her Highness told you?" Xiao Yuni looked down and glared at her coldly, as if he wanted to tear her apart. "You also stopped me like this the night she got into trouble. Now you want to use the same reason to stop me again. Get out of my way." Fei Luan was pushed away and hit the railing heavily. She did not bother to check her injuries and knelt on the stone steps in front of him. She stretched out her hands and said sincerely, "You can ignore Her Majesty's advice, but what about your throne? Don't you want it anymore? You have endured hardships for nearly 20 years and finally have the opportunity today. Now that His Majesty is in danger and the Empress is in a difficult situation, she is afraid to take action. She has no children and you are her last chess piece to protect herself. When the situation is desperate, she has only one way, that is to put you on the throne in exchange for her safety. So you can't go down. Not only can you not go down to see Ningxu, you can't do anything. Don't help her. The more chaotic the situation is, the more you are helping yourself. Your Highness the Sixth Prince, for so many years, only Fei Luan understands your ambition, your ability, and the thousands of grievances in your heart. Fei Luan cannot watch you make a mistake and regret it in the future. Also, Miss Ning doesn't have you in her heart. Even if you go down to see her, it won't help." Before Fei Luan finished speaking, hatred flashed past Xiao Yuni's eyes. He raised his leg and kicked Fei Luan to the side. Fei Luan looked up and spat out a mouthful of blood, but she still climbed up stubbornly and stood in front of Xiao Yuni again. The mask on her face cracked and fell to the ground. Xiaoqing looked at her familiar face with a cold smile and said with hatred, "It's the same rhetoric again, the same high-sounding bewitchment. That day at the city gate, when I inspected the princess's entourage, I vaguely felt that something was wrong. When the entourage left, I suddenly came to my senses and immediately urged my horse to chase after them. In terms of timing, I was much earlier than that Xiaoqing. I could have stopped her in time when she was injured, and I could have brought her back first after she was seriously injured. I could have even replaced that blind man by her side to take care of her and cherish her when she collapsed. Finally, I could have regained her trust and brought time back to the past. If I do that, Xiaoqing will have nothing to do with me. She and I could have started all over again, but you ruined it all. That year, when this prince went out on a campaign to wipe out the bandits, your entire family was killed by the bandits. You were the only survivor. I saw that your appearance was somewhat similar to Shu Er's, so I was moved to love the house and its crow. Thus, I saved your life from the bandits' swords. I didn't keep you because you are you, but because you are like her shadow. When this prince took you in, I told you that your life will belong to me from now on. If necessary, I will let you die in Shu Er's place. However, you had thoughts that you shouldn't have. What, could it be that you want to replace Shu as this princess. You want to be the future phoenix master of the Great Yu dynasty. The blood drained from Wan's face, and her lips trembled violently. 2 streams of tears slid down her face as she said, Your Highness the 6th Prince, Wan admits that Wan does have feelings for you. I know that my body is like grass, and even standing by your side is my greatest wish. However, Wan had no other choice. That day at the foot of Flame Breath Mountain, I saw with my own eyes that my parents and brothers had their throats slit by the bandits and were hung above the forest of corpses. I saw their blood dripping down like rain, and I saw them reach out to me, wanting me to save them. It was as if they didn't want me to be left alone in this world to be defiled by those beasts. However, I had no other choice. I was like a piece of meat on a chopping board whose limbs were twisted off, allowing those beasts to tear my clothes. I wanted to. At that time, I even had thoughts of dying. I was about to bite my tongue to commit suicide, but it was Your Highness who rode a red horse and wore a scarlet cloak to pierce through that beast's throat. However, I also know that I am just a piece of mud under your feet, a blade of grass on the ground. I am not worthy of you, so I never dared to have such extravagant hopes. The reason I stopped you was not because I had selfish thoughts, but because of you. Chapter 537. It was a snow-white face. Her eyes were mournful, and there were 2 streams of tears. Her facial features were extremely similar to Ning Shu's, and because of his kick, the owner of this face was heavily injured. Blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. But even so, she was still trying her best to plan for him. As for Lady Ning, although she is in a difficult situation for now, her life is not in danger and her injuries will slowly get better. With your secret protection, when you ascend the throne, you will naturally be able to protect her entire family. As for Mr. Xiaohou, others may not know, but Your Highness should know him like the back of your hand. He won't live for long. When he dies, Lady Ning will have no one else to rely on. Thinking about how you saved her, who else can she marry other than you? You can't spoil the plan because of a moment of anger. The hidden part of Xiao Yunyi's heart twitched and he frowned. Are you serious? Fei Luan swayed weakly. If Fei Luan says anything wrong, let me be struck by lightning and die a horrible death, and be despised by Your Highness for all eternity. This was one of the highest places in the entire palace. Xiao Yunyi closed his eyes and gripped the sword in his hand tightly. He felt the wind from above and felt the sky enveloping him from all directions without any obstacles. The scarlet cloak behind him flapped loudly, as if he was hiding the ambition in his heart. After a long time, he finally made a decision and said in a low voice, I'll believe you one more time. Below the high platform, a dignified and beautiful woman in a sandalwood dress looked up carelessly, then covered her mouth with a handkerchief and coughed softly. Beside her, a granny whose face was burned by fire supported her and said hoarsely, Zhaoyi, you've been praying for His Majesty day and night and haven't been able to sleep. Your body is not very good and it's already late. I'll help you back to rest. Yin Zhaoyi said slowly, Shu Shui, it's an eventful time now. Many things are pending and we don't know if His Majesty will wake up again. How do you expect me to rest peacefully? Shu Shui said in a low voice, where there should be people, there are people. What should be done is going according to the track. What is there to worry about? When His Highness the 6th Prince ascends to the throne and removes the stumbling block that is Empress Dowager Chao, there will be no one else but you. Your long-cherished wish of many years is about to be fulfilled. You should be happy. With Shu Shui's support, Yin Zhaoyi slowly walked along the long palace path. She was gentle and elegant like a mother of the world. Yes, it has been too long, too long. For this day, I have sacrificed too much. I even gave my only son to her. I've endured for so many years, and I've finally waited for this day. I'm not ashamed of the previous Empress support. Shu Shui, are you looking forward to it? Shu Shui lowered her head. Her voice was like her person, like a hand that could easily cut people with a broken bowl. I am looking forward to it like Nyang Nyang. Yin Zhaoyi smiled. This person, who had pretended to be cautious for half her life in the palace, finally showed her first indulgent smile in many years on this empty palace road. She didn't make a single sound, but she was like a giant beast that bared its fangs and wanted to swallow the entire royal palace and the power of the world into its stomach. Wife, wife. This is my family's Shiziye's idea, not mine. Don't ignore me. If it was me, I would definitely treat your young miss and you like Buddha in our Wang Fu and not let her take a step out. But I can't make the decision, good wife, I'll apologize to you. As soon as the carriage stopped in front of the palace gate, Shi Yan hurriedly followed Zigui's footsteps, bowing and apologizing all the way. In return, Zigui rolled his eyes at him and scolded him, "Get lost." His ferocious attitude seemed to say that if Shi Yan said one more word, he would take a knife and cut him into pieces. That posture, no matter how thick-skinned and bold Shi Yan was, he shrunk back in fright. He watched as she went forward with heartache to help Ning Shu, who was squatting at the palace gates, into the carriage. She didn't want the people of the Wang Fu to drive the carriage. With a whip, she sent them all away and drove the carriage away herself. Shi Yan's eyes were filled with tears. He ate 3 li of dust and still didn't get Zigui to turn back. He held his head in grief and squatted on the ground, wanting to cry but having no tears. Chapter 538. It's Eldest Mississippi. That's great. Eldest Miss is back. Eldest Miss is back. Ning Shu had just gotten off the carriage. The originally gloomy House of Duke seemed to have finally seen a glimmer of hope. The whole house was in an uproar. When Forsythia saw Ning Shu, she couldn't help but cry emotionally. Even Madame Yang and the others, who were originally not on good terms with the second branch, wiped their tears and hurriedly greeted her. "Oh, Shu girl. Auntie is finally waiting for you. If you didn't come back, I'm afraid that the hundreds of people in our House of Duke would really be finished." Ning Diyuan didn't even have time to change his boots. When he heard the servant's report, he hurriedly rushed over. After carefully sizing up Ning Shu and confirming that she was fine, his wrinkled eyes twitched. The man who had always been indomitable had his eyes silently red. He clenched his fists. "Good child, it's great that you're fine. As long as you're fine, father and your mother don't need to be afraid of anything." Looking at the handsome man who had a similar silhouette to her, Ning Shu knew without a teacher that this should be her father. Because in this world, only biological parents would always put the safety of their children at the top of their hearts above their own lives. Behind him, a small person struggled to keep up with his father's footsteps with a pair of short legs. It was little Ji. The originally soft and squishy fat ball of glutinous rice had lost a lot of weight in a short period of time. Because of his daily longing, his eyes were swollen from crying. Seeing Ning Shu, the little guy was stunned for a moment. Then, like a slingshot, he pounced on Ning Shu. His small mouth pouted and he wailed, "Sister, you're alive. That's great, that's great. Ji has a sister again. But, mother has been taken away. Elder sister, mother has been taken away." Looking at the eager faces in front of her, a vague sense of familiarity arose spontaneously like an instinct, making her have no choice but to get close to them. There were some people and some things that didn't need to be said. Blood ties were the most omnipotent summons. She urged her to stretch out her hands and embrace the soft ball in front of her. She softly coaxed, "Ji, don't be afraid. Sister is here. Sister will definitely save mother. After a short moment of excitement, Ning Deyuan evacuated the crowd and asked the nanny to take Ji-er away. He pulled Ning Shu to the side worriedly and said, "Good girl, you shouldn't have come back. That person wants to destroy our family. The longer you stay here, the more dangerous it will be. Go quickly. Father will assign all the personal guards around me to you. Take your brother and leave this place immediately. Father is begging you." Noticing that Ning Shu was different from before and her eyes were slightly dazed, Ning Deyuan was stunned and subconsciously asked Zigui, "What's wrong with your young miss?" Zigui silently choked with sobs. She slowly opened her mouth, revealing a piece that was missing. Then, she anxiously picked up a branch from the ground and wrote about Ning Shu's serious injury and amnesia. "So that box and that piece of tongue were yours. In the end, I was too smart for my own good. I almost caused you to step into a desperate situation. It's my fault. I underestimated that person's terror." Ning Deyuan's eyes reddened even more. He beat his hands and stamped his feet, but the matter had already reached this point. It was urgent and he knew that he didn't have time to regret. He hurriedly made a decision. "It's because father has already harmed you once that I can't watch you stay here. Leave this place. The situation is already out of control. We're already half buried in the earth. As long as I'm with your mother, it's enough for me whether I live or die. I only hope that you can live on." Ning Shu lightly but firmly shook her head. She rolled up her sleeves and showed Ning Deyuan the ugly and terrifying scars that had already healed and stopped bleeding. They bulged up and were ugly and terrifying. She completely destroyed his hope. "Seeing these scars, you should understand. Father, I won't leave. I want to know who the person you're talking about is." Chapter 539. Ning Deyuan was shocked to see that his precious daughter, whom he could not even bear to say a harsh word to, had ended up in such a wounded state. He covered his face with heartache. This man used to be a handsome man, but after he became a husband and a father, he carried a heavy burden on his shoulders. He racked his brains and didn't dare to take a single wrong step, but in the end, he couldn't protect the treasure in his heart. That person is the most terrible person in the world. For so many years, he has been hovering around our family like a ghost. He tried everything, but not only did he fail to send Ning Shu away, but he also got her covered in wounds. Ning Deyuan knew that the person was ready to kill her, so he narrated with mixed feelings and tiredness. "I first met your mother in the 6th year of Heaven Selection. At that time, I bumped into your mother on the street and fell in love with her at first sight. I did everything I could to get her to marry me. At first, I thought that your mother despised me because when I was young in the army, I was rude and didn't know how to be considerate to others. But I didn't expect that when I brought a matchmaker with me to propose marriage, she would actually agree. At that time, I was really overjoyed and couldn't contain my joy. I decided on the spot that I would do my best to give your mother the best and most lively wedding. Only then would she be worthy of the best Heartwarming in the world." Ning Deyuan slowly narrated, as if he was immersed in his memories. The smile on his face was joyful and painful. "Because our house of Marquis was rich and Heartwarming was also a commandery princess personally conferred by the late emperor, I did not break my promise. That day, I rode a tall horse and brought your mother's wedding sedan chair. 10 miles of red wedding, flowers everywhere. The common people who came to watch the wedding were so packed that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Everyone exclaimed in admiration. This was definitely the most enviable wedding in the past 10 years. I think so too. Your grandfather, your grandmother, and even your mother smiled like spring flowers when they were performing the wedding ceremony. I thought that waiting for us would be the sweetest and most beautiful life. I didn't expect that on the first morning after we woke up as newlyweds, there would suddenly be a dark red wedding letter next to the 2 burnt-out wedding candles in our new room. There was only one word written on it, and there was a pungent smell of blood. I've killed people on the battlefield, so I know that it's human blood. Ning Shu's heart tightened and her brows wrinkled. Just when she entered the residence, she met hundreds of servants and guards. How could an ordinary person sneak in? Moreover, it was a newlywed's wedding room. For the sake of auspiciousness, there would be many guards around. In addition, her father had also fought on the battlefield. For a person to be able to quietly sneak in and do such a thing right under his nose, it was frightening. Ning Deyuan continued, "Your mother has always been timid, and we were newlyweds. I didn't want to frighten her, so I secretly hid the congratulatory letter and secretly investigated it. However, I searched the entire manor from top to bottom and couldn't find the slightest clue. In those few months, there was also no second strange incident. Although I had doubts in my heart, I also felt lucky. Perhaps the person had a grudge against me in the past, and after threatening me on the night of our wedding, he might have given up at that point. I observed for another half a year. As usual, nothing happened, so I completely threw that matter to the back of my mind. After a year or two, your mother became pregnant with you. I was so happy that I almost wanted to flip the roof over. I immediately sent people to give porridge for 10 days to pray for you and your mother, and to protect you and your mother. I knew that your mother was afraid of pain and that it would be difficult for her to give birth. Therefore, during that time, I stayed by your mother's side and did not leave her side. I just watched your mother's belly grow bigger day by day, looking forward to the day you came into the world of the living. The heavens heard my pleas. You and your mother safely passed through the crisis. The entire residence was filled with jubilation. However, on such a joyous day, I did not expect that person to appear again. After your mother gave birth, she fell asleep for a while. When she woke up, she suddenly found that she was holding a piece of paper in her hand. This time, there were 4 words: "You rejoice, I grieve." Chapter 540. Ning Deyuan wiped his face and found the flowery letter that had been sealed away for nearly 18 years. The flowery letter had already turned yellow due to the erosion of time, but every word on it was filled with anger. They seemed to have been written with fresh blood. The blood was still hot, dripping down and seeping into the back of the paper bit by bit. It constantly clung to the thin paper, questioning, roaring, and cursing the outside of the paper. And there is a thick stack of words hidden under the paper. Ning Deyuan squeezed the scary and hateful things hard. It was from that day onwards that the invisible person haunted our house like a ghost, haunting us. Every time our family has a happy event, he will appear quietly and extinguish all the joy. No matter how many methods we have thought of and how many servants and guards we have placed around the mansion, we can't catch even a shadow of him. Over time, we don't even dare to announce the happy event, because every happy event ends in fear and intimidation. Your mother's body was originally weak, and after experiencing so many shocks, she even hurt her foundation. When she gave birth to your younger brother, she almost. But that person still refused to let us go, as if it was enough to force us to death. Your mother has asked me for many times to divorce her. In this way, that man may let go of the Ning family and only take revenge on your mother. But I have been with her for many years. How can I watch her in danger? I am worse than a beast. Seeing the back of Ning Deyuan's hand trembling violently, Ning Shu feels so sad that she can't breathe. Her nose is sour and she holds her father's arm. Ning Deyuan raises his head and looks at his daughter, who is as beautiful and determined as an orchid. He raises his hand and tucks a strand of hair on her forehead to her temples. We have been hiding this secret all these years. The only time it was revealed in front of you was when you were 10 years old. That crazy Taoist broke into the gate of the mansion and publicly sentenced you to the death of 9 generations of your family. We know that it is useless. Even if we die, it is useless. That man wants our whole family to die, including you. What was even more frightening was that we didn't even know what he wanted to do. We were like flies that were being toyed with by him. Seeing that your 17th birthday was approaching, we were worried sick, and your marriage had not been settled. Therefore, after a long period of deep thought, I came up with this idea, to create a false impression that you had been killed, and secretly send you away. At the same time, we also know that you have a clever personality, but you are the most stubborn in your bones. Once you set your mind on something, you will never turn back. You are exactly the same as me when I was young. If we tell you the truth, you definitely won't agree to leave the capital. So after I discussed with your mother, I made this decision. After you drank the special medicine, I had Pangue use a soul-controlling technique on you to send you safely out of the capital. Then I sent people to escort your grandmother and out of the city in the second wave. Finally, I will meet you at the border of southern Yen Kingdom and live a peaceful life together with you while concealing your identity. However, who knew that when the plan was only half implemented, that man found out and almost killed you? Ning Diyuan raised his hand in self-reproach and slapped himself hard on the face, leaving 5 long fingerprints. It's daddy's useless. Not only was I unable to protect you, even your mother was imprisoned. It's daddy's incompetence. Chapter 541. Father. Seeing the finger marks on his face, Ning Shu pressed down on his hand. She couldn't stop her tears from rolling down. I wronged you. These years, how did you live? It wasn't a day or two, but nearly 17 years, nearly 6,000 days, nights. For her and for this family, they were like walking on thin ice, enduring unimaginable torture. Normal people would go crazy after a day like that, but what about them? No matter how exhausted they were at night, when they opened the door in the morning and faced her and they still had to do their best to smile and pretend to be at peace. She couldn't imagine it, because as soon as she thought about it, her heart hurt so much that she couldn't straighten her back. However, she knew that now wasn't the time to cry. Empress Chao's warning was still in her ears. There wasn't much time left for her and the Ning family. She held her breath. When she opened her eyes again, her thoughts were clear. Father, I still have a question. Why is that person so fixated on mother? Ning Diyuan stooped down and sat on a high stool under the windowsill. The clouds covered the moon, and not a single ray of light could be seen. Only a corridor lamp outside the window swayed, casting a dim light on his dry lips. There is a secret that you may not know. Or rather, there aren't many people in the world who know that secret and are still alive. This has to be traced back to more than 20 years ago, when the present emperor hadn't ascended the throne and was still a nameless prince. There was a woman who the world called Empress Zhou. At the time, although I wasn't very old, I was already enlightened. I was very familiar with this Empress Zhou. She was really a strange woman. The previous emperor had 300 concubines in his harem. Young, beautiful, and talented, they were like carps in the river. But none of them had received the previous emperor's grand favor. To put it bluntly, the former emperor really wasn't a wise ruler. His throne hadn't been won by him through painstaking efforts. Instead, it had come from his mother, who was extremely scheming, and his uncle's family, who was extremely powerful. He was lazy and didn't like to govern the country. He left all the important matters of the country to the prime minister and assistant prime minister. He liked poetry and books the most and didn't care about the people's livelihood. Instead, he was interested in carpentry. In the 15 years after he ascended the throne, the people of Great Yu did not make any progress. The lives of the people became increasingly difficult, and there were complaints from the people everywhere. Countless imperial censors, remonstrants, and old ministers broke their heads in the throne room, but it was to no avail. Until Empress Zhou came. From the first day she entered the palace, the previous emperor had been infatuated with her. In order to make her smile, the late emperor offered her countless treasures, but she didn't even look at them. He spent a lot of money to build the fairy stargazing tower, but she turned and left without even looking at it. The late emperor tried his best to find out that she liked pearls from the Eastern Sea, so he ordered hundreds of palace servants to spend half a year collecting Qinhu pearls from the Eastern Sea and sent them to her for her choice. She frowned and poured all the Qinhu pearls into the supreme liquid pool, scolding the late emperor for wasting money and manpower. In the end, the late emperor was at his wits' end. For her sake, he gradually began to attend court and ask about politics. Little by little, he also learned how to read memorials. His previous lazy, arrogant, and extravagant style took on a new lease of life, and he even began to look like a wise ruler. Such a big change made all the civil and military officials, as well as the millions of people, overjoyed and praised him. Empress Zhou was the biggest contributor behind the scenes. However, there were also many people who were secretly worried. Empress Zhou was beautiful, but there would always be a time when her beauty would fade. As the saying goes, love grows when beauty declines. When she was no longer as beautiful as a flower, the previous emperor would throw himself into someone else's arms. Would this great momentum be gone forever? But it turned out that they were thinking too much. As time passed, the previous emperor didn't dislike her. Instead, he favored her even more, to the point where he even wanted her to sit on the dragon throne with him. Perhaps it was on that day that the people's praise for Empress Zhou turned into disgust overnight. Chapter 542. No one knows why Empress Zhou became like that. Ning Deyuan's face was filled with emotion. A magnificent, legendary, and terrifying picture scroll slowly unfolded with his voice. Perhaps the late emperor gave her too much power. Not only did he allow her to choose the world's treasures, but he also allowed her to interfere in court politics. He even allowed her to pass memorials. When she was 40 years old, the late emperor did not hesitate to spend half of the national treasury to build Phoenix Terrace for her and ordered all the people of the city to come and pay their respects. Because the late emperor was getting older, the position of crown prince was still undecided. The court officials repeatedly mentioned it, but the late emperor blocked it on the grounds that he was waiting for the empress to give birth. Even after the late emperor passed the age of heaven, the empress was still unable to successfully give birth to a baby boy. The previous emperor could not withstand the pressure and finally decided to choose one of the princes. This prince was the one that the Empress of Zhou had strongly recommended. He was her elder sister who had passed away, the only bloodline left behind by the Empress of Zhou. He was also her nephew. This action was very similar to the Tang dynasty's Empress Wu several hundred years ago, preparing to steal the Li family's empire. The court officials were filled with righteous indignation. Opposing memorials floated to His Majesty's desk like snowflakes, but none of them entered the late emperor's eyes. Empress Zhou's power was already as great as a giant beast. It could no longer be blocked, and she disdained to hide it. The crown prince was like a sword in her hand. As long as he was in her hand, she could sit firmly on the empire. Over time, even His Majesty began to realize her ambition and gradually distanced himself from her. However, it was already too late. Xiao Zhou had discovered his intentions and made the first move by feeding him poison, causing him to fall ill. That poison was extremely mysterious. It was colorless and odorless. Even the most brilliant imperial physicians were unable to diagnose it. The only thing that could be seen was a blood-red 5-petaled plum blossom quietly blooming on his neck. At that time, everyone was lamenting that the Great Yu's empire was about to change hands and that the people were about to suffer. Who would have thought that Empress Zhou would suddenly become insane overnight? She killed the late crown prince with one slash of her sword. Then, she used the blood-stained sword to kill the hundreds of people in the Phoenix Algae Palace. She then lit a fire and burned the corpses into black charcoal. She was the only one alive and was locked up in Phoenix Terrace by Jin Xing's order. All the civil and military officials in the imperial court couldn't make up their minds on how to deal with this insane demon empress. After laughing crazily for a few days and nights, she lit another fire and buried herself together with the dazzling Phoenix Terrace. Since then, her time had finally passed. What has all this to do with your mother, you may ask? Actually, many of the secrets in this story were told to me by your mother before we got married. On the day of Empress Zhou's 40th birthday, your mother went with her father and brother to Phoenix Terrace to congratulate her. Empress Zhou once saw that your mother was born with exquisite features and that her 8 characters were extremely blessed, so she often summoned your mother into the palace to accompany her. Xian Di also often saw your mother in Phoenix Algae Palace, so he opened his golden mouth and said that this was the origin of your mother's Junju position. From the age of 7 to 10, your mother accompanied her in the palace for about 3 years until the day before the fire in Phoenix Algae Palace, when she suddenly fell ill and was sent out of the palace. By the time she recovered and woke up, it was already half a month later. She couldn't remember what happened during that time. However, your mother's temperament was gentle and she stood aloof from worldly affairs. Other than this matter, I can't think of any other possibility. It was such a long story. By the time Ning Deyuan finished, his throat was already hoarse and he was filled with exhaustion. And the many doubts in Ning Shu's heart had finally reached the tip of the iceberg. However, Ning Shu couldn't imagine what kind of unimaginable weight was hidden under that tip of the iceberg. In any case, Ning Shu had personally shattered Ning Deyuan's idea of sending them out of the capital. He couldn't think of any other way and could only return to his room to rest under Ning Shu's persuasion. In the hidden room, only Ning Shu and Zigui were left. The two of them looked at each other silently. Afraid that Ning Shu couldn't see clearly, Zigui specially took out a fairy rabbit lantern and placed it in front of Ning Shu. Under the lantern light, Ning Shu's tranquil face stared unblinkingly at the thick stack of old papers in the box. After a moment of deep thought, she asked Zigui for a cup of tea. She dipped her finger into the light green tea leaves floating on the surface and then quietly sorted out her thoughts on the table. 25 years ago, Empress Zhou, the demon empress who brought disaster to the country, the late emperor was poisoned, and he suddenly went crazy when he was in power. Mother contracted an illness, and her memories were incomplete. 25 years later, the curses continued, a blood letter fell from the sky, the demon empress who brought disaster to the country, the present sage was in a coma, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Finally, she raised her finger and drew 2 strokes on the table. She wrote a big X on the table. Then, she slowly and solemnly wrote the last 3 words behind the X, Y. Ha 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 ha, guilty conscience, guilty conscience. Woo woo. Jiang Chizu was still desperately struggling to vent. Finally, her mouth was gagged by a guard with a piece of ragged cloth. She opened her eyes wide and intermittently uttered her final curse in her throat. Chow. When you. I'll open my eyes wide and wait for you to have an empty dream. Ha ha ha, what an empty dream. Empress Chow's face was livid. She almost lost her composure and shouted, "Take her away. Gag her mouth and take her away immediately." When Jiang Chizu was finally knocked unconscious and dragged away by the imperial bodyguards, Empress Chao clenched her trembling hands under her bright yellow sleeves. She walked back to Funing Palace with a tense expression. "Call the sixth prince over for this consort. Immediately." "Yes. This servant will go and invite His Highness the sixth prince." Kai Bing did not dare to delay and ran out. After a cup of tea, Xiao Yuni came over with his hand on his sword. His face was still tired from being awakened in the middle of the night. After kowtowing, he removed his cloak and sword. He walked in front of Empress Chao and bent his knees in front of her. He looked up at her and said gently, "Imperial Mother, I heard that the abandoned consort of the Cold Palace ran out and disturbed you. Can I deal with her for you?" Empress Chao opened her eyes and pinched his arm hard. "What's the use of dealing with her? Wasn't she locked up in the Cold Palace? How did she know what happened outside the Cold Palace? Who told her all of this? Also, who was the one who let her out? Who was it? Could it be that there's a hidden force in the palace that even I don't know about that is manipulating all of this?" Chapter 544. Because she was too agitated, Empress Chao's well-maintained long and sharp nails dug deeply into Xiao Yuni's arm. She quickly sobered up and let go of his hand, saying tiredly, "It's Mother. I lost my composure." Xiao Yuni smiled unconcernedly. "No, it's that crazy woman who barged in and said crazy things that frightened Mother. Mother, don't worry. From tonight onwards, I will personally guard outside the palace and won't let anyone disturb you. As for what Mother is worried about, I will find a way to find out as soon as possible. As long as I'm here, you won't be in any danger." His respectful attitude greatly pleased the Empress. She raised her hand to hold the obedient face in front of her. "You're a good person. With you here, Mother can rest assured. Good child, that bitch in the Cold Palace has lived long enough and is tired of living. Your father is seriously ill and she suddenly made a scene today and worsened His Majesty's condition. She has committed such a grave sin. You should end her for me." "Yes, Mother." Xiao Yuni took the order and turned to leave. Behind him, Empress Chao suddenly said calmly and distantly, "Will you betray me?" Xiao Yuni's footsteps paused. He turned around and pressed a hand to his chest, saying with a smile, "No, I will always be loyal to Mother." The corners of Empress Chao's mouth rose, her eyes filled with a gentle unloving smile. She looked at him from afar and said, "Good child, remember the words you said today. You must also remember that without Imperial Mother, no one can help you sit on the throne. Imperial Mother's future will depend on you. Imperial Mother and you are one. Aken will always remember this." Xiao Yuni took off his sword and cloak and changed into a cold golden armor. He stepped out of the majestic palace and then pushed open the rotten door of the Cold Palace. Half an hour later, there was a shrill scream from the palace. Xiao Yuni walked out with a dark expression, holding a bloody sword. His personal guard wanted to go forward to take the sword, but was frozen by his gaze and did not dare to go close. The stars above shone brightly, but under the watery starlight, half of Xiao Yuni's face was splattered with hot blood. In such a hot and humid summer night, the heat dissipated especially slowly. The guard had followed him to many battles, but it was the first time he saw his gaze so terrifying. It was 1,000 times colder and more complicated than before, like an abyss that was hidden in the dark. This night, many people were destined to not be able to sleep. When Ning Shu woke up, her head was very heavy. She rubbed her head and asked for Scythia to bring her a basin of cold water. She patted her face to make herself feel better. After helping Ning Shu freshen up and change her clothes, Forsythia did not stop to prepare breakfast. She looked at Ning Shu with tears in her eyes. Miss, you've suffered outside these days. It's all for Scythia's fault for not being by your side to take care of you. You've become as thin as a piece of paper. You'll be blown away by the wind. Quick, quick. Miss, hurry and eat breakfast. I've specially prepared a few of your favorite dishes. I'll definitely feed you until you're as white and fat as before. Ning Shu's mouth twitched. Are you sure it's just a few dishes? There were already more than a dozen dishes on the table in front of her, and there was still a long line of servants outside serving the dishes. Not to mention one person, even a table full of people would be stuffed. Could it be that I, the young miss, was a reincarnation of a hungry ghost? What do you mean by white and fat? Are you raising a human or a pig? Under Forsythia's burning gaze, Ning Shu had no choice but to bite the bullet and eat. After a few dishes, she was almost full. But when she put down her chopsticks, Forsythia put on a sad face, as if to say, Miss, why aren't you eating? Is it because Forsythia's dishes are not to your taste? Forsythia is really useless. She'd rather die. Ning Shu was stressed and could only reluctantly eat another mouthful. She did not dare to stop eating. Zigui pretended not to see Ning Shu's pleading eyes and just watched. She could help Miss with other things, but she could not bear this. Fortunately, Hui Mo came in time and helped her out. Ning Shu hurriedly tidied up her clothes and went out. Lian Qiao originally wanted to follow, but Ning Shu thought of a way to make her stay behind to guard the rear and guard the house. This kind of strong care and concern was really too much for her. Fortunately, Forsythia was kind and easy to fool. Miss, solving the case is important, but your health is also important. I'll wait for you to come back. Is 30 dishes enough for tonight's dinner? But I'll add more to the menu. Ning Shu's feet slipped and she almost fell onto the ground.